There we go.
Hey, there we go.
Welcome to F1 or F Off, your audio pit stop for F1 news, interviews, and race reviews. I'm your host, Gabe.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Idris.
Yes.
We've been doing a thing where...
Another stop on the bilingual intros. I love it.
Yes.
So today we have a very special episode with a very special guest. She is a cat enthusiast, a hair metal enthusiast, and a overall race car enthusiast. She is also a tremendously excellent journalist for motorsports and other things, and she co-hosts a podcast, DRS, through Donut Media with Alanis King and Nolan Sykes, and her name is Elizabeth Blackstock. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello, how's it going? So good to be here. Got the
so
U.S.
excited.
Grand Prix gang reunited.
Yes.
We're here.
Yes.
We're doing it.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Well, and just that I love that little sort of thing now, because I don't know if I told you, Idris and I have a little group with Knockoff McLaren, Shinali, and Tiernan, and so anytime something F1 related news comes up, or if there's some meme or something, it's always shared between us.
Oh yeah.
So
I love that so much.
That little cluster of friends has continued onward since that USGP. It was such a special weekend.
I love to hear that. It was so nice just to have it, but also keeping in touch with everyone afterward has been really cool. So I'm so glad everyone came out, and y'all are cool.
Yeah,
it's great.
You're cool.
Absolutely. And we adopted the name too, USGP gang. It is the name of the group chat,
The crew. I love that so much.
Yeah.
I'll have to send you a
stuff.
picture. One of the fun things we did is there was a moment, I forget what Grand Prix, but Shinali specifically had some really intense hot takes, and she said that she was switching into hater mode. And so I think Lance Stroll's, that they have the graphic on the Halo and it says DRS mode activated. I just photoshopped hater mode activated into it, and that's
I love
picture
this
we
so
have.
much.
Yeah.
It's all great.
That's so funny.
So Elizabeth, tell us about just briefly kind of how your past couple of weeks went, because you were just in London, right, for the FE Grand Prix and stuff. How did that go? What was that like?
I was a little bit of everywhere. The last 2 months, I think I've been on the road more than I've actually ever been at home. So I did Portland for Formula E, went right from there to Nashville for Monster Jam,
that's right.
which was obscenely fun. Went home for 2 weeks, then back on the road again, went to Iowa for IndyCar, and then off to London for Formula E. And now I'm finally home. I was going to say, it's my first weekend back. So yesterday I did nothing. Absolutely. So as I'm just gonna lay here, drink coffee, and sit with the cats.
Oh yes.
So it was great, but honestly, so much fun. London's one of my favorite places, but Formula E is also great. I had a very fun little moment where I was interviewing Mitch Evans, and I had spoken to him in Portland, but also I never want to assume that anyone's going to remember who I am. So I introduced myself, and he was like, yeah, no, we definitely talked before, but that's okay. I have a very forgettable face. I was I just don't want to assume. It wasn't even. I was real hungover in Portland when we were doing. It was a roundtable interview, so I didn't even ask a single question. I just stood there having the worst day of my life.
Oh boy!
I'm glad I made an impression on you. It was so much fun.
That Portland FE Grand Prix, or the
so
E Prix they call it right now.
The E Prix.
E-Prix, yes. Absolutely. That was such a fun weekend. I actually had a fun little moment, too. I was listening to a couple of other podcasts, and I was listening to one where they were talking about being at the Portland E-Prix. And they made a mention of some guy they had that model car in the middle of the thing, over in the fan area, and some guy got down, he was taking pictures of the diffuser, and he's like, oh, that's so cool. And I was like, dude, that's weird, but it's not real, but okay. And I was listening, I'm like, oh, that was totally me. I 100% got down and took a picture of the diffuser, and I think I said out loud, "Oh, I want to get a picture of the diffuser." I was nerding out. Like I know it's a model car, but like
still,
you got to get those shots.
It's so cool.
So.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
How many opportunities
it is
do
so
you get?
Cool.
How many opportunities do you get to sit in front of that, right, and just snap a photo, right? Like I get to be the spy for Red Bull, you know, or I get to channel what it feels like, right?
When we go electric, when Formula One goes electric, you are going to have the photos and you are going to be prepared.
Well, okay, they're obvious. Okay, there's so many things. Like, there's so many things I want to get your opinion on and questions about.
Yes.
Like, and so like that I gotta write that down because there's one that I was thinking about, and that it just has to do with specifically design language, and I guess it's something that we could probably, I definitely want to touch base on at some point too, because. The design language across, well, okay, let me just say this first.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of the big things that we wanted to talk to you about specifically on this episode was IndyCar. Because Idris and I have been talking about wanting to talk about it and wanting to get, you know, because we're, you know, we do, it's F1 podcast, but yeah, we want to talk about that, right? Because it's America's premier open wheel, you know, racing series. And in the past couple of days, this past week, I've been watching a lot of IndyCar. Obviously, I went to the Formula E Prix too, and the one thing I noticed was how different the design language is between each series. As far as like, you know, FE is all narrow and they're all really angular, and it's like very cyberpunk, and then. You know, IndyCar is a little more flowy, but still very seemingly like very robust and very kind of just like wide. And then F1 is just like it's like something out of it's like if Blade Runner had all smooth edges, like you know what I mean? Like it's so wild. And I guess before we to really kind of start to talk about those differences, I guess the one thing that I would like to ask you, Elizabeth, if you want to kick it off really quick, is sort of when it comes to IndyCar, like where did you sort of like where was the beginning, the apex of your or the genesis of your like
the blossoming
IndyCar journey, like, and maybe is it tied to your motorsport journey in general, like?
So when I grew up with NASCAR a little bit, you know, and we got out of it as a family when I was a kid. I was born and raised in Michigan, so like always it was in the car industry like pretty solidly. And then when it was 2013, I was in college. I was not in college yet. I was in high school, sorry. Movie Rush came out.
Yes.
I had such a crush on Chris Hemsworth because I'd gotten really into Norse mythology. So I went and saw Thor, and then I was like, oh, like race car, and also this guy this actor, like this is perfect. What more do I need? Saw the movie, and I got home, and I can still distinctly remember the car ride home where I was like, I need to Google this because I don't believe that this is real. Like they obviously Hollywoodified this movie.
Sure.
And like the story wasn't good. The story's way better. Like James Hunt and Niki Lauda were actually friends, which I think makes that whole story so much more complex. I just like deep dived into it. Went to my first race, the US Grand Prix in 2014, thinking like, I'm just going to get this out of my system because I was going to college down in Austin at the University of Texas at that point. And by the end of that weekend, my friend and I were like, hey, why don't we just go to like Europe next year? No big deal. Like we'll just pop over for a couple of races and do some stuff.
Okay.
And then, so at that point, I think both of us were really into it. My friend Remy, we're still buddies. We were like, let's get into this Formula E thing because we knew a bunch of the racers from Formula E had come from F1. So it was like, we had some familiar names, and also like, let's get into this IndyCar thing. We had another friend named Zoe who was like, you know, if you think F1 is good, try these personalities on for size. If you think like the things you don't like about F1, where you at that point in time, drivers really weren't allowed to use social media in any way or shape or form that would make them seem like a human.
Yeah.
So Zoe was like, here are all of these like videos, right? Here's Joseph Newgarden being silly. Here's James Hinchcliffe in a dog wash. Like all of this ridiculous stuff where it was like, you know, it was like, okay, this is fun. This is fun. You know, going to space camp, like it was just good stuff. So in 2015, my friend and I had done that whole like European adventure. we came back and I was like, what are we gonna do now? You know, like it's a long time until the US Grand Prix. We still got a couple of months. We're like, let's just go to an IndyCar race, right? Let's just go to Pocono.
Yeah.
So we drove out to Pocono in 2015. We were amazed by like how cheap it was. We did infield camping. We got paddock passes so you could just walk around in there, and we had tickets. So we watched qualifying from the pit lane. We met all of the drivers. We could see the cars. It was just a totally different experience than what we had seen in Europe, where we were spending a lot more money and getting a lot less for what we were spending. So it was definitely life-changing in a lot of ways. That weekend was a difficult one. It ended up being the first time I saw a race car driver pass away. Justin Wilson was, but I think that gave us this opportunity to like understand more deeply what motorsport was and why this was what makes IndyCar different and not perhaps quite as sound as Formula One. And it was really like, I don't know. I still think back on that weekend, and it was primarily a really good time. Like waking up at 8 a.m. to the sound of the jet dryers, like blowing off the racetrack because you're in the middle of this triangle. So after that, I was like, yeah, I'm hooked. Like the racing is so good. We saw cars going 7 wide. Like what an obscene thing. After F1 of like, I just watched Mercedes win every team, every single race I went to. That's it.
Yes.
It is fascinating. I don't know. I remember like my F1 journey started around 2010, and I kind of pulled Idris into it only because I didn't have anybody that was watching it or knew anything about it. Because like you said, the media was all closed. It was all like nobody was really talking about it. I had to like beg my parents to like get the proper Dish Network channel package so that I could watch it on speed. And I thankfully pulled Idris into it, and he was just like, yeah, man, this is dope. Like, I think what was your reaction at first? When you're like, I don't know.
Probably just like, you know, because that's typically the face I make when something's really exciting. But like, yeah, it was fascinating because Gabe had been trying to get me into this for years and years and years, right? And so the first motorsport event that I went to, and I think it was Gabe's first event too, was Mid-Ohio. Was it 2012? Or 2013. It was 2012 or 2013. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, when I was a kid, probably around maybe 2005 or so, 2004, 2005, I actually went to a kart race at Burt Lakefront Airport in Cleveland. And
that's fun.
Yeah, I had no idea what it was. All I remember was, and we had really good seats. We were right in front of the pit lane.
Oh, man.
And so, like, I just, the thing I remember the most is when the cars would take off after they were pitting. It was just it felt like somebody was, like, in your chest, like, punching you.
Yes.
The vibration was so intense. Yeah. And then at the end of it, they were giving away free tires, and I could have taken a tire with me, but we didn't have the space. We didn't have the space. I didn't know.
Man.
And so... And for the longest time, I also now, like, I was thinking back, like, I went to that race. I didn't even know what Champ Car was because I didn't realize the kind of, you know, it wasn't until we watched that video, the split. But as Idris was saying, we went to, it was, I think it was 2012. That sounds about right.
2012 or 2013-ish. Yeah. And I just remember just that feeling of just being at an event, and we were sitting over in Thunder Valley. That was our first like real experience of like feeling like your chest is shaking.
That's nice.
You're like, what is going on? And we had always really liked cars, right? Growing up playing Need for Speed Underground, watching all the Fast and Furious movies, right? So to see all like that in real life was just like next level, right? And Gabe he'd finally chipped away at me to say, look, dude, you're studying engineering. You should watch Formula One. You would really like it. And so I started watching it. Yeah. And then as I'm watching, I'm like, why did you not tell me about this earlier? And he's like, dude, I've been telling you for years. You don't listen, you know?
It's the same with my brother. My brother for years was just like, he kind of poked fun at how much I took F1 seriously as much as liking it. And then he watched Drive to Survive, and he told me to come over because he wanted to talk to me about it. And he opened the door, and he was like a little kid with his head down, and he was just like, you're right. And I was like,
that's so funny.
Yeah.
I was like, once you get into it, like, I think it's a lot more than what people see, which is primarily just like going around in circles.
Yes.
Right.
Or, you know, funny looking circles. There's like this whole thing behind it that makes it what it is.
Right. Well, on that subject, Elizabeth, when it's specifically talking about IndyCar, I've observed just like watching. I was watching the sort of the 30-second kind of fast forward replays of the races just to try and catch up as much as I could and absorb everything. There's a lot of things that I noticed as far as kind of how it differentiates from like the other motorsports around, and not us knowing the background with the kart split and the idea behind that with like oval racing versus like road racing. What would you say is like, as far as IndyCar goes, like in its current state, like what do you feel is the biggest sort of like appeal as far as like why would somebody want to watch IndyCar? Like what about it gives it sort of a distinction that makes it interesting, that's like you would say is the most appeal in that way?
Yeah.
I think it's so hard to pick a thing.
Yeah.
Because there's so much about it that I think makes IndyCar what it is. But I think the one that I am actually going to pick is that you can tell that the personalities within this field and in the paddock and the garage area actually like get along. And even if you're not, you know, even if you're watching the racing, you see a lot more, not necessarily even respectful, but just like there's just this different level to it where it feels a little bit smaller. Everyone kind of seems like they know each other. And I think that's the thing. Like F1 can feel so huge and unwieldy and hard to break into. IndyCar becomes so much different when it's like the fans can get access to this race. You can just kind of go, and it's not a horrifyingly expensive amount of money. You know, you can go to the Indy 500 for like $150, and that's like best top of the tier seats that you can get.
What? Really?
So
for the
affordable.
Indy 500? Oh, I thought those tickets would be like just like way more expensive.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
No, like
That's fascinating.
it's a whole. It's a much more, I think, accessible thing, and I think that is in part because the sport, not only like there was the split, but there was one before that in the 70s that people kind of forget about, where the teams deviated from the like Indianapolis Motor Speedway sanctioning body. And so like there's been these divisions this whole time where everyone's been fighting with each other, and the sport almost died. You had those factions at the big split that had gone off and had to come back together in 2008. I think what makes this special is everyone realizes how close it came to American open wheel being gone entirely.
Yeah.
And like everyone seems kind of united in trying to bring it back to life.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think that sticks out a lot more. And I don't know. I went, like when I was in Iowa this year, I was there with the Expel sponsor for Team Penske.
Yes.
They brought out a wonderful teenager named Reagan. She has her own podcast already called Race Roadie. Like she's full into this, but it was her first race.
That's
and
awesome.
there is a gentleman who works at Andretti Autosport named Ziggy,
Yeah.
who came up to me when I was just a fan and was like, "Why do you keep coming to all of these races? Like, what are you doing here? What are you getting out of this?" And I was like, "I just want to be here." Every time I see him since then, doesn't matter how long it's been since I last saw him, he will come over and say hi.
Wow.
He met Reagan the first time this weekend. He chatted to her. He just like told her some jokes. And then he was like, "Do you want some sunscreen? Do you need some water? If you need anything, I'm going to tell my crew guys what you look like. I'm going to tell them that you guys can come over here anytime you need something. If you just see me, just say something and we'll get you hooked up." Like, you know, things like that where it's
That's
like,
beautiful.
That's
yeah,
great.
they like actually make an effort to make friends. And I think like that's the thing that's, once you start to get to know the series a little bit, you'll realize like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like there's a whole YouTube series about two teammates being bros on a bus together. Like they hang out in the bus lot. It's freaking awesome.
I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that really makes it like special for me. And then I think if you come from like the cutthroat, like everyone, not even like yelling at each other from everyone, but like the passive aggressive, we use the media to like sass each other, and no one's ever had a conversation in their entire lives. It's just refreshing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me. So when we were at just at Mid Ohio, Dries, do you remember that's the Simon Pagenaud crash, that big one that happened?
Oh my God. Yeah.
qualifying.
Yes.
What we looked on the screen, and I didn't realize this until later. Somebody had talked about it on YouTube. There was a medical worker who was standing with him on the side, and she was holding his hand, and she was kind of pulling on his hand and like talking to him. And somebody pointed out that the medical staff follows the sport. They're not supplied by like the track, and so these are like people who interact with the drivers and check in with them constantly.
Yeah.
And so it's not just their medical needs that they're familiar with, but it's also
It's
like
everything.
their emotional needs.
Yeah.
And that is honestly just super beautiful. And
Yeah.
I do agree. Although I will ask, I did see what was it? I think it was Road America. Romain Grosjean and Scott Dixon had like a little punch up or something like on the track.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Like, Dixon said he wanted to like punch Grosjean or something like that. Is that fueled by a lot of adrenaline like it is with F1? Or like...
You get a lot of the adrenaline, but there's also currently, with the way that IndyCar has evolved, there's a little bit of a distinction between the guys who have come in from other sports, particularly European ones, who have a very different attitude and mindset. And so that's a kind of a criticism you'll hear a lot about someone like Grosjean, even Alexander Rossi, who come from this like PR trained, we don't make friends, we fight hard kind of attitude. And like you'll get like a lot of times it takes a little while to break down. People had the same reactions to like Marcus Ericsson, but now he's a good friend of everyone in the area.
Yes.
But like Grosjean is still one of those where it's not just like the adrenaline, but it's also kind of like the ideological aspects of these two different sports bumping heads where
I see.
People don't think Grosjean is racing as respectfully as they would race anyone else within the IndyCar series.
Gotcha.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. He comes from more of like each man for himself kind of thing, which is more of the European side as opposed to like, I'm not saying everyone works together and we're all like nice all the time in IndyCar, but like there is more of this like, I think a recognition that the cars are still a lot more dangerous than they would be in F1.
Sure.
You still don't want to screw around with that kind of stuff, especially on certain tracks.
Sure.
That like it makes it, you have to approach it a little bit differently. And Grosjean has not quite got there yet. He's still got that punch up about him.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I mean, he's still fresh out of Formula One, right? So, I mean, for him to unlearn that, right? I mean, he grew up in the European racing circuits, right? So that's going to be tough to kind of overcome, right? But it is good to hear Marcus Ericsson has been embraced, Like, I did recently hear that he said that he really enjoys racing in IndyCar, right? That it's just, he would recommend others to come join it too. And I love seeing this influx of people from outside, right? Like, IndyCar is really becoming more of an international like recruiting pool type of thing, right? Where people are just coming in, they're like, this is fun too. There's a lot that the sport has to offer. And I think the races that we've been to and the races that we've been watching, I think just highlight and elicit that even more so.
It's getting back to the point that it was kind of in the 90s where that was this thing that was big appeal where like Nigel Mansell won a Formula One World Championship and was like, we're going over to IndyCar. Part of it, like, yes, he was kind of like squeezed out of contracts. Yes, that was a big part of it. And I don't want to deny that, but also it was like it was a comparably compelling series at the time that was on its way to rival what Formula One was if it had been able to am I allowed to swear? I should have asked that ahead of time.
Go for it.
To keep it shit together.
There we
Keep
go.
shit together, dog.
If they had done that, like who knows where we'd be now? But
it's always funny with those weird, like, especially like listening to the split between the IRL and the kart, and like the whole like there was like you hear this old like kind of what was like late 80s early 90s like little introduction video, just like, here at IRL we're here to bring out the most important racing aspect, and like the guy was talking about is like we believe in close racing and that's why we race on ovals,
right?
And it is really fascinating to hear that a lot of the concerns that people have about modern F1 are still going on.
Right.
Like everyone's still concerned about close racing. They're still concerned about how many passes happen. And that's the one thing I will say that I noticed as I'm watching, like, 'cause I was telling Idris that I was having some really conflicting feelings as I was watching these races in Indy, because I'm just like,
Yeah.
I felt like
On the edge of
I
your
wish
seat.
F1 was at and I wish
Yeah.
part of me wishes that F1 was this exciting all the time. And I guess for me, one thing, if you could explain to me specifically, because I know there's some people who contest this, but from what I understand, IndyCar is sort of is kind of a spec series in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Because the chassis are essentially universal. They use the same aero kits depending on the race, and the engines are more or less the same as well, right? Like they're even though it's Honda and Chevy, the regulations are so close that they're almost inseparable from each other in a way. And like F1 is not that. F1 is all about like, here's the regulations, but like interpret them in the best way you can through.
Right.
So, I mean, when you think about those sort of specific differences, like, are there aspects of the way that IndyCar has their technical structure set in place that F1 could benefit from? Or do you think that like F1 should sort of retain its own identity in that sense?
That's like such a big, like, overarching ideological question
Yeah.
that I have so many feelings about that all conflict with each other.
Yeah.
Like, part of the reason that IndyCar is a spec series and it is so competitive is because they needed to encourage people to come back and race in the series.
Right.
And when this, everything had fractured apart, there were those big divisions previously where there were teams that were just so much better and had the money to be so much better and could dump in the money to do, crazy things with crazy engines and crazy aerodynamic parts. But that split kind of forced everyone to reconvene. And you'll notice that even I don't even want to say minor, there changes in the structure of the rules and stuff will regularly get pushed back in IndyCar in a way that you would never see in Formula One. We've been supposed to go to hybrid engines for years, and that keeps getting pushed back because there's not enough. Everyone's just kind of worried, like, you just don't have the money to do it. You just don't have the opportunity or the ability. And it does kind of create a forced level playing field in a lot of ways. And I don't necessarily think that is an issue. I also don't really think that's what Formula One is trying to be. Formula One wants to be the pinnacle of evolution and development. And it is making choices that like go against it, like cost cap and stuff. I understand why these things exist.
Yeah.
You're right.
But like, it's difficult in this day and age where the advantages you're getting are so minute and they're so technical that it takes those millions of dollars to get that level up on your competition.
Yeah.
So it's like, I wish that there was a little bit more that F1 would do, but also F1 it's trying to reconcile its own perception of itself with what it needs to be on track. And you're not getting, I encourage people to look back on the history of F1 and you'll realize like it wasn't always perfect. You had a lot of different winners, not necessarily because every car was better, just because all the cars were bad. No one could finish a freaking race. Like, you got 7 different winners in 7 different races, not because like, everyone was an equal playing field, because 4 cars finished a race.
Like, it just like a plume of smoke would explode. And like, the leader's out. The leader's out. Yeah.
Like it's fun to watch. That's cool. But also like in 2023, you are not at that point anymore. You've refined the cars to the point where like it's rare if a retirement happens, it's a big deal. Not like that's the primary thing that happens to everyone who enters this race.
Right.
It needs to like look at it from a different perspective. I think it needs, I think it needs to take itself a lot less seriously, Formula One. In order to understand like, what do you want this to be? It seems like they're at this crossheads right now, or they want it to be entertainment. They also want it to be top of the line, technical, whatever. You can't reconcile those two things. Like that's just not going to exist unless you are giving everyone the money and the opportunities to, exist on that level playing field. But they're not, because Ferrari just gets extra money because it's there. Like,
Oh,
like you can't have all of these things and be the same, be a competitive sport.
Yeah.
That's just not how it works.
Right.
Gabe and I have very strong feelings about the Ferrari legacy. Like, it is.
Yeah.
That is a whole nother topic we'll delve into. But like,
Bro,
what you
imagine
said,
getting that much money and still being bad.
oh my, just
Like,
repeatedly,
embarrassing.
like, how hard can I punch myself in the face, just for the heck of doing it, guys? Like, that's Ferrari every single race. Oh my goodness,
It's funny because it's like,
is it funny?
It's like,
they're
it
getting
is
like
funny.
hundreds of
It's
millions.
funny.
It's hilarious.
funny.
That's what it is. But what's interesting is that, like I said, like, so I started watching in like 2010, right? So that was like the Fernando Alonso, Felipe Massa Ferrari era, right? And even then, they were winning races, but Red Bull was just better. And even back then, though, I remember Ferrari being like, what are you guys doing? Like, they were doing something wrong. They would mess up some strategy. Like Alonso, part of the reason why I have a soft spot for him, and part of the reason why like I fell kind of in racing love with him as a driver, is because like he was able to take as a poor situation at Ferrari where they were not doing what they needed to help him, and yet he still was able to find race results. And he even said, like, I don't care if I'm uncomfortable in a car, if it's fast, that's what I care about. And I can respect that as like a driver, but especially when I was listening to Vettel, who would complain if his seat was like slightly out of position or something like that at that time in his Red Bull era. But like, this has been going on forever. And I remember when like Sebastian showed up there, I thought like, oh, this will be interesting. And like, he started winning and I'm like, oh, maybe this is it. Nope. No, didn't happen. That legacy payment, they might as well go to catering, if we're honest. Like, there's no point.
And catering for all, right?
The best pasta bar in the
Oh, best hot pasta bar.
Idris, go ahead.
So, and I was gonna say, like, with that, it makes me think, or actually maybe use that money to let Andretti into F1. Like, come on. Like, I agree 100%. Like, you got to stop taking yourself so seriously. And it's really frustrating because I think one of the things I really admire about IndyCar is, like, I think that, like, when it comes to motorsports, I think outside of safety, entertainment is, like, the biggest selling factor, right? And it's interesting to see that IndyCar governing body, sanctioning body has brought down the regulations to a level where any and everyone can come in, right? Like the three of us, we can throw together a quick $5 million, start up a team, right? Taco Bell,
$5 million,
McDonald's.
that's a lot for IndyCar, though. We'd be like top of the field.
A quick $5 million.
But a quick $5 million. But that is like a drop in the bucket for what you need for Formula One, right?
Yes,
and you look at Formula One, and it's like they're at such a weird crossroads, right? Because Formula E, I feel like the FIA like dropped the ball big time on this. Like F1 did, as far as electrification of their cars, right? Because here you have Formula E holding like an exclusive rights like to the technology, like the platform, the power plant, right? Until 2039, and now you have F1 here in 2023 that's to figure it out up until that point, right? But at the same time, you have biofuels. At the same time, you have sustainable fuels. At the same time, you have people saying, let's just go back to V8s and 100% raw gasoline. Just pour it in, baby.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to make a choice here. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the 2026 technical regulations that come in for Formula One and what happens after the fact, because this is kind of like a huge identity crisis they're facing. And I think it's because of this super seriousness they've had for so long. And I think this is why IndyCar, just like as we've been watching this, like, and just like diving deep into this, I'm just like, this is excellent what IndyCar is doing, because they're really hitting the nail on the head as far as just we know what you guys want, we're gonna give it to you. Don't worry about all this other stuff. Like, this is another rant I have. Just like the FIA talking about, oh, we're gonna regionalize the calendar and everything, right? And then you look at the calendar, it's like, this is not. If we're talking about,
you changed like two things.
Oh my god, two. If we're talking about like reducing carbon footprint and stuff, like I don't think F1 is necessarily like the racing is the way to do it necessarily. That is rant aside, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. Yeah. It's just the seriousness of which they take themselves. I think is kind of negatively impacting things right now. So just like kudos to IndyCar for like I think just really nailing the formula on that.
Well,
formula.
yeah, you know what's funny? That's one of the things that was really giving me conflicting feelings, because I read that article that you sent us, Elizabeth, that you did about sort of like the kind of F1
Excellent write-up, by the way.
IndyCar. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One of it actually answered a couple of questions, but I just wanted to kind of clarify specifically, because one of the conflicting things that I was getting, that I was just like, this is strange, is the fact that when I thought about it, you had mentioned that IndyCar is using like carbon net neutral fuels, right, from Shell, and they're using their tire material is not rubber; it's like another material.
It's called Waiuli, and it is rubber adjacent product derived from a shrub that grows in the Arizona desert. Takes a lot less water to grow. They can also harvest it and use it in the, right there, no shipping costs, none of that. It releases a lot less grossness into the environment, and it's the alternate tire now on this every street circuit. So they're racing in Nashville right now. If you look at the green tires, like that's the ones. So that the eco-friendly ones.
Yeah. And I that blew my mind. I had no idea about that. And so now, like, when I think about it, I'm like, okay, so they're using more environmentally friendly materials. They are most on one continent, so their travel costs and their travel emissions are way less than F1 because they're not hauling stuff across in planes, which, like, planes are some of the worst emitters as far as, like, and the fact that, like, it also, you're getting the win-win, because this makes it more accessible as far as to the fans, like you were saying, like be only paying I bought my tickets to PIR for the Indy race, and the paddock pass, that was $165. That's like half the price that we pay for just general admission at Texas. GP there. And that, to me, it almost feels like it's too good to be true. It's like, how in the world can we get this much entertainment and be this much guilt-free or get this much guiltless about it, because it's like, and I think, like, that I would agree with Idris. It's just like, you guys, F1 has this thing where it's like, IndyCar at this point has nothing left to lose. It's like, it's the underdog. They went through their split. They're trying to rebuild. So it's like, hey man, we're just here, whatever. We're just doing it. And F1 is just like, they're like the MVP high school person, but they graduated high school. Right?
It's over.
They're sort of like still feel like they're at the top of their popularity, and they're trying to do everything. They're like still hanging out at the high school during the summer and helping out the freshman football players. But like everyone's just like, wait, didn't you graduate?
Dude, like they would have won.
Identity.
They would have won if Coach had put them in at States. we make a reference to that like almost every single episode, and without fail. Like
Napoleon Dynamite
place.
It is one of those turning points of my humor as a person. Yes, 100%. As a young adult, like I still think about that movie occasionally. Like everything that I've gotten out of from it, my fandom for Jamiroquai. Like just the aesthetics of it, the color palette, and just it is one of the most quotable movies ever. But
it really is.
Yeah, but I would say I'm curious. Next, I'd like to ask you something that two things I had specifically thought of. One thing that happened in Mid Ohio that I remember. So in Mid Ohio, the first turn, Marcus Ericsson flipped over another car and landed. One of the things that I noticed IndyCar does that I kind of wish Formula One would do is they just like tow them out of the side of the track and just let them keep going and get back to the pits and try and start again. We were under the impression that Marcus Ericsson was just done, but they ended up fixing his car and he went around for a couple of laps,
sent him back
even
out.
though he was like, 3/4 of the race was done. Why would a team make that decision to do? Because I noticed that they get at least 5 points for finishing last, but like, is there a reason why they would go around a few laps even though they're like so far down?
Yeah, so it is a matter of like, if you can bump up a position over top of someone else, like if you log more laps than someone else who is retired, you can move up, you can actually get more points. Which is, you always want those. They count for a lot.
Sure.
IndyCar has a much different point system than F1, where like almost everyone who does anything in a race gets extra points. F1's only the top 10. So if you can get out there and you can't, like, maybe there's a big crash, maybe 6 cars get wiped out and you've got one more lap over them. like it makes
I
sense.
see,
And
yeah.
if you can get some stuff, like there is actually a reward for going out there and doing that. F1, it's like if you're gonna be, if you fix it for 6 laps and then you get back out there, you're 6 laps behind, it's over. You're not gonna
Yeah.
get anything from it.
Yeah.
There's no way
no incentive.
you're ever going to make those up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
IndyCar, there is an incentive to actually get back out and do it.
Right.
So
and
they take the
and they
Oprah
penalize. Yeah, and they penalize people for going off track. You like or not going off track. If they get penalized, if like the marshals try and push them, try and get them going again or something. I don't understand that. Like I wish, I don't know,
Right.
I wish they would get a chance to get back out on track because that's what people want to see.
Right.
Right.
I was gonna
They
say
want
that's
to see
a European context, I think. Same thing at Le Mans. Like that was one of the big things in the olden days was like no outside help because it was a lot easier to just hey fellas from the woods, my car is dead, come help me get it back out on track.
Just,
Hey, you woodland people.
Yeah,
Come here.
like just come on. So it's one of those things where it's just a much different atmosphere of what we allow here in America as opposed to what decorum and rules they have over in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
That's amazing. And that, so the running theme seems to be just the pomp and circumstance of the FIA, right? The smoking pipe and, smoking jack and everything. And it's so funny because I think we recently had an instance of this that was just kind of astounding to watch unfold, right? And that was the whole Colton Herta situation a couple years back, right? Yeah, I think your face says it all. Your face says it all. So yeah, let's just dive right in. We want to hear all of your thoughts because it just kind of points towards this whole thing of the Americans, they cannot race in us. You know what I mean? It just comes off very.
We are exclusive.
And retired. And the way they just evaluate super license or I guess allocate super license points and stuff is it just seems to be out of whack, right? So what are your thoughts on that, and how do we fix it so that we get more Americans into that system who want to go over into F1 from IndyCar, right?
So I have so many. I could write a manifesto on this whole thing.
The IndyCar manifesto.
On a piece of loose leaf, and you just slip it under the Andretti, trailer.
Yeah, here you go, fellas. This is all you'll need. This is your argument. My first going point is that the FIA is kind of a clique. It is an international racing organization, but it also is international in the context of continental European primarily.
Yeah.
We've got two very distinct car cultures when you look at the two countries side by side, two very different evolutions of how racing happened, two very different contexts in which racing is still conducted today. So if you are an American fan and you show up to a race, you probably have a different idea of how that race will go down and what it will entail than if you were a French fan. You have so many different expectations.
Sure.
That means, you've got the European side where they had these organizations developed in these rich dudes racing cars, forever ago because had America when cars were developed wasn't fully done yet. We still there was a lot of work to go.
Yeah.
When you were over in Europe, you at least had some horse tracks you could race on.
Yeah.
You could go do things.
Uh-huh.
So you had very, very different evolutions. And then you've got the Europeans looking over at America and they're like, well, what are you doing? That's so silly. You're racing on an oval track because that's it was a horse track. What do you do? We got rid of that years ago. You thank your sponsors. Why do you do that? That's so silly. We don't have to do that. We just people just assume. And then you've got them looking over and seeing, especially in the context of IndyCar, these power struggles playing out over and over and over again, where no one can agree, no one can do anything. Everyone is falling apart. Everyone is falling out. F1 had something similar in the late 70s, early 80s. They had the teams form their own organization, the constructors, that were going against what the FIA essentially was at the time, because the teams wanted more money and the FIA was we're keeping it and doling it out as we see fit. What you have now currently And the FIA is the winning party of that argument, looking over at Americans and seeing us do the same thing in the very recent past and having like no sympathy whatsoever. Like, screw you guys. It's, we don't need to do this. So
Gotcha.
There's a whole lot of like context there, but also you do have the context of IndyCar is different. They're looking at it with a totally different lens of value as opposed to what, we see open wheel racing that's really competitive, people fighting. The cars are so different though. The racing types are so different. The circuits are so different. You've got this like look from the FIA that says, actually, no, this isn't fine. This isn't worth our time. This isn't worth us giving any value or attention to. And like, I do think the FIA undervalues the skills of drivers in IndyCar. I think that's terrible. Like, they had something very similar with Pato O'Ward, where Pato was like getting into IndyCar, and then they signed him into Red Bull, and then they were going to pull him over there, and then they were like, actually, you're not going to have the super license points we want, so we're just going to cast you off.
Red Bull.
But I think the Red Bull is just this whole thing, another can of worms.
Oh yeah. Yes. Can you write a whole nother manifesto about Red Bull? 100%. Yeah, and they're
specifically about helmet though. Honestly, like real talk.
What a terrible little man.
He needs to just stop. Just say like, okay, Grandpa, here's your
retire
cup. Sit down. Yeah, every time that man says something, I'm just like, it's like, please.
We don't need to ask him anymore. Yep. Like we don't.
Talk to him. We don't. No, and clearly he doesn't. Yeah. Clearly he really. I don't know. I mean, it's weird. I remember him saying like, just as a little aside, I remember him saying that Danny Ricciardo was not in the running to replace De Vries, and then guess what?
Yeah.
He did. Mm-hmm. So it's just like either Red Bull or him are lying, or somebody's not communicating. I don't know what's happening.
Or both.
I don't know. Apparently, all of their other options fell through, and then they had to consider him, I guess. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, it is funny to go back to our discussion about specifically drivers too. When I getting into IndyCar now, I have a soft spot for Romain Grosjean, and like he's like my guy. It's like I remember watching him in F1. I remember that big accident he had at Belgium, and I remember how much that affected him mentally.
2012 or so, right?
Yeah, I think so. That was like he just flipped over the field, and everybody blamed him. And I remember thinking he was one of those drivers, along with one of your favorites too, Jean-Eric Vergne, where I remember those two guys, were just like ones that people did not appreciate that much. And it's like they kind of got the rug swept out from under them a little bit. I mean, Grosjean had a decently lengthy career in F1, which is great. But that's why I was really excited to see that when he came into IndyCar, like he was, more or less pretty well received by the fans. And then, like, he had those top two finishes at the beginning of the year, and then he just kept binning it into every wall, every race. And I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And, I mean, do you think that kind of ties into, like you said, sort of like having that sort of European driving background and mentality sort of affecting it? Or do you think, like, it's just a matter of him kind of still getting used to the team? And also, are the teams at IndyCar as cutthroat as like Red Bull, to where it's like if he keeps crashing into the wall, they're going to be like, well, Roman, sorry, you're out?
There's multiple things I'm going to touch on here. The first big one is like when you think about European racing, it's easy to not screw up. Like if you go off the track, you can just kind of keep driving and it's fine.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Here in IndyCar, like you drive off the track and there's grass literally right there. There's a wall right there. There are other cars in your way. It makes for a much different driving experience where the mistakes that you can make in F1 are punished a lot harder than they would be normally. So it's a whole different, I think he's still kind of figuring that out. He's still figuring out, when you get used to an open wheel car, it's difficult to get into like another one that's kind of sort of a little bit similar, but not at all the same thing.
Yeah.
And then expect that you can control that horsepower, the different downforce, and to learn all of these different things in a field of like 27 cars some weekends. Like there's just so much that can go wrong. But it is also the same where it's like if Grosjean is not delivering to the team, it is going to be a matter of like they can just cut him. And it's been a rumor that I have heard for a while is that like he's just like he needs to get it together because it's when an Indy car breaks, like the cars themselves aren't a lot of money, but the teams also don't have infinite supplies to just make things go away.
Yeah.
They're not Mercedes.
So you've got if you've got a broken car every weekend, like bad news bears. You've got like you're just not going to be able to fix it. You're not going to have the spares you need. You're not going to have the supplies you need. And then when you get to the end of the year and someone else needs help, like it's over. You can't do anything with your team anymore.
Yeah.
So it's definitely one of those, like, it's not quite as cutthroat as a Red Bull is, but it is also still motorsport. Like you have to be delivering and you have to be like, I don't want to say earning your keep, but like, not being worse for the team than you are of a benefit. There comes a point where like being Romain Grosjean and a former F1 driver does not matter if you just like are like ringing the death knell of every single chassis that ever comes your way.
Oh, that's that's a bummer. I mean, I
it's
hope
tough,
I hope it gets it together. I mean, absolutely, right? Yeah, there's a balance you must maintain there. You got to be better than you are, worse than you are,
Do you, Elizabeth, do you feel like the a couple of things that come to mind in my head now when you talk about sort of the idea of like cars going off, having the runoff areas of some like kind of not, what are your thoughts about the state of the tracks as far as IndyCar when it comes to safety and like kind of how they are? Because I did notice a lot of the tracks just have a lot of walls. And a lot of just if you hit like especially St. Petersburg, there's that turn where there was Pagenaud went over another driver, and I couldn't help but notice that there was just a tire barrier there, and they hit the tire barrier and they just like bounced back into traffic, and like I was just like that can't be safe. And then it also makes me think of like when Austria happened and everybody kept getting those penalties for going off the track. And I was thinking to myself, like, if there was a wall there, everybody would be crashing into that wall, apparently.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, if that was the thing. So, like, what are your thoughts on, like, just that generally? Like,
it's another, like, area of conflict where, like, I definitely am aware of the fact that IndyCar is not as robust and safe as car in because, like, the development of the cars, the amount of money that you can put in them has just been limited. And, like, there have been far more fatal accidents in IndyCar in the past 20 years than in F1. That's just a fact of the matter. Part of it is like, they are not racing on circuits that are up to FIA grade 1 standards. But they're also not able to, I think, make the investment that is required to build up those facilities. Like IndyCar developed Safer Barrier, which is, the cushion in the inside of it. When you hit it, it cuts down some of that pressure. Even when those tire barriers push you back into traffic, that is a matter of, a safety issue, but those tracks are often so tight as well that you're not going at the speeds that you would where that would really be an issue. Still not great. But it is kind of like that throwback series where like everyone, wishes that F1 would race on XYZ track in the way that it used to exist when they raced on it 40 some years ago. I like IndyCar has done well and has developed a lot of things, especially the advances it's made on oval track safety are incredible. The use of like the Hans device, the head and neck safety. There's so much pioneering stuff that went on in IndyCar. If you haven't read the book Rapid Response, I highly recommend it. It comes from one of the two like full-time physicians who started working with IndyCar and developing the safety team that we know today that travels with the crews and is there and gets to know them.
That's awesome.
And one of the like they were conducting pioneering research that Bernie Ecclestone was asking for to utilize in Formula One. Like they had facilities that they were building, things that they were doing, procedures that they had implemented that, we're a cut above everything else.
Mm.
So they have kind of this infrastructure that happens and that it exists where it can kind of pick up the slack a little bit on those tracks where it is not quite so safe. But then you also have to be aware that you might end up at places like Pocono where, my husband and I went the first time we went on a race together as like an official couple was when Robert Wickens had his terrible accident.
Oh.
My husband's Canadian, so it was like the guy he was cheering for.
And
we watched them like zip tie a rusty like fence to the hole in the fence, and we just got in left because that was a level of safety that I was like, I cannot.
Zip ties are good. They're not that good.
Yeah, they're not like IndyCar full force through the hole kind of good. Like they're not going to withstand that kind of pressure.
Yeah.
So, there've been things like that where like that's still a place where IndyCar absolutely needs to continue to grow. But that is also the reason why Pocono is not on the schedule anymore because enough people, i.e. me, complained about it publicly enough and we're refusing to go.
Right.
I was living in Philadelphia at the time. It was just a drive up the road.
Yeah.
And it was like, but I don't want to go watch someone get ridiculously hurt.
Right.
Yes. Right.
I think one of the things that gets lost in translation sometimes when we as motorsports fans say we want excitement, right? Like we don't we want to see people right on the edge, you know what I mean? You don't want to see people ever go over that edge, right? And it's really disheartening whenever, you see, like you just look at the history of motorsports, how many times we just refuse to learn from past incidents of people just letting racing go on in very unsafe conditions, right? Like one that comes to mind that really, really irked like Gabe and I want to say you actually mentioned this on podcasts too, on DRS, was Pierre Gasly in Suzuka, right? That is like so incredibly dangerous, right? And it's like, guys, I understand we want to let the racing go on and stuff, but like we have a 1-to-1 incident that happened with this back in 2014 with Jules Bianchi, right? Why have we not learned from that, right?
Yeah.
Why are we zip tying fences together? Like that's absurd.
It's a metaphor seemingly for the safety of some like attitudes of like that'll do, it's fine, it's together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you can't half-ass your way to being like productive, healthy, safe series. Like it requires making preliminary steps before there's even an indication of a problem or the first like hint of it. It's honestly mind-blowing to me that we still have feeder series chassis that cannot sustain a side hit. And that we can see drivers continue, that we still put them on wet conditions at Spa.
Oh my God,
I don't understand how that is still allowed to happen. You know what I mean? Like there's just, it's not just, we can look at IndyCar and be like, it's, the standards aren't up to par, but you've also got similar issues that are happening everywhere in every series that need to be addressed. And it's like, is another, and it was unacceptable to race at Pocono. It is also unacceptable to be putting these cars out at Spa that are, in the wet, potential to like cause someone's death. It just goes, and we've seen it. This is something that like we should have addressed many a year ago and still continue to allow to happen.
And then
it's
real quick, I was going to say real quick, Gabe. And then you have these feeder series too. Like these are like 14, 15, 16-year-olds, right? So there's also these power dynamics at play here where these are literal children who can't say like, hey, I don't want to do this, right? As opposed to just being told, no, you're going to get out there and just do this because the team really needs you this weekend. It's very risky. It's very risky. And
it is.
I'm glad they listened to you and they were like, hey, remove Pocono. Blackstock says it's off the calendar this year.
Blackstock says it's off.
All me. I lose my input explicitly.
We are poking no way going to this place. I agree. I don't think that a race car that will literally split in half from a side impact should not be allowed on a racetrack, let alone in the rain. I also think that it is very still unfortunate that we seemingly do not make big safety innovations until somebody loses their life or
Right.
has some major.
Mhm.
Like we didn't get the virtual safety car until Jules Bianchi. The whole aero screen and Halo device thing did not come around until after Dan Whedon and Jules had those accidents. Well, and then
And Justin Wilson at Pocono.
and Justin Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's just like it's frustrating that it takes so long for us to get to this point, and people have to lose their life for it.
There were similar things where, like in NASCAR, the Hans device wasn't made mandatory. You could choose not to wear that until Dale Earnhardt was killed.
Right.
It's similar, even if there are these technologies that exist and these things that have been proven to help, when do you implement them? It's always a little bit too late. And sometimes you don't realize what needs to be fixed until it needs to be fixed, and you find out the hard way. There's no way you can simulate every possible disaster that can go wrong on a racetrack.
Yeah.
But also when you've got overwhelming evidence that these things keep happening in a specific place, in a specific way, and in a specific, like, with certain drivers, perhaps we could do something about that a little speedier than, just sitting around and waiting and hoping something will change.
Exactly. Well, and one thing, this is a little segue to the next thing I'd like to have a discussion with us about. Obviously, safety concerns and people being injured on track. Not only is it not good for, obviously the people involved, it's also not good for like the spectators and the sponsors because nobody wants to see that because they're here to be entertained, and the sponsors don't want to have a car where their logo is split in half and somebody dies.
Correct.
And so I guess that makes me think though too, like I'd like to talk about sponsorship specifically in IndyCar because this is the one of the things that when I was watching it, Idris, I don't know if you felt the same thing, Idris, when you were kind of consuming some content, but coming from F1, I'm used to that sort of world where, originally the cars raced in the country's colors, and then Lotus was like, well, we're going to be sponsored by, a cigarette brand, and they changed the whole thing. But even throughout F1's history, for the most part, the drivers were distinguished on track, whether they were like two in a pair, they had the same livery and the same sponsors, and so it was always easily identifiable. I was watching IndyCar, and apart from like Will Power and maybe like Kirkwood, like Joseph Newgarden has had like 3 or 4 different liveries like across the season. And it's much. It's almost so hard to realize. I'm like, who's this green car on track? That's Newgarden? Like, where is it that, what's the reason for IndyCar kind of allowing all these changes to be in this way like they do? Like, are there any regulations behind it? Like, how does that compare to the way F1 does advertising on the cars and stuff?
F1 implemented very strict rules in, I believe it was the 80s, but maybe don't quote me on that, about how many drivers were allowed to be on a team and what those cars could look like. So there used to be a time in F1 where you could just have a one-off car that shows up for a race. You could have 6 cars on a team that came to a track just because why not? And then F1 kind of cut that down for, part of it was the easily digestible thing of like, these 2 drivers are in these 2 cars at every time, and those cars look the same. But deals are done much differently in European motorsport than in America, and this was something that Alanis and I learned while we were riding Racing with Rich Energy. In America, those deals are much more temporary. They often are tied to a driver, not so much the team. So when you've got issues over in Europe, that Mercedes is negotiating with FTX for that sponsorship. Red Bull is negotiating with Oracle, and they're doing it on the sense of longevity. They're doing it as this is a full-time sponsorship thing that you can benefit from in all aspects at all times. And they're doing it because they have to have that. You have to submit your team name and have that approved, and you cannot change those things at a certain time because the FIA says you can't. IndyCar is a lot different because it's a hard sell to sponsor an IndyCar for a full season. what are you really gaining from it? It's hard to say. How do you know that the sport's not going to fall apart again? Like, we're about due for an implosion based on the history of how IndyCar has gone over time.
Okay.
You've got stuff like that, and you've also got the regional market attitudes. So that's why when you go to like Iowa or the Midwest, you've got Hy-Vee sponsorships. Hy-Vee wants you to go shop at those stores, but what value does that have down in Texas?
Right.
We don't have those here.
Okay.
Right.
So it's weird that it is frustrating that it changes all the time. I watch IndyCar every weekend and still have to kind of like, okay, why is this the way it is? As you watch for a longer period of time, you'll often find that like certain drivers have certain sponsors they keep, or there's a rotation that goes through the teams.
Okay.
So, with Scott McLaughlin, I was in Iowa with Expel. He was Expel sponsor primarily that weekend, but he still got that on his on his race suit in his car. It's just a Dex Imaging car this weekend in Nashville, but the hills, rotate between those kinds of things. So it's a lot more fluid. It does make it a lot more difficult for new fans to kind of get involved. That's why I'm always like, you can watch for Scott Dixon. He is in the number 9, like PNC Bank Honda. It's the same car every weekend.
Yeah.
You're going to see the McLaren ones that are going to look exactly the same because for some reason McLaren decided they wanted to look like Scott Dixon. You can keep an eye on those. The Meyer Shank cars, and for some reason Kyle Kirkwood are all pink. There's certain things that you can hold on to, but it is one of the criticisms I think that there is about Indy cars. Just how do you sell that to someone for like, how do you guarantee longevity and a multi-year partnership when maybe your team hasn't existed for multiple years, or maybe the sport itself hasn't existed for long enough to give you a business study of how this works. It's just, it's the matters of business. I'm sure that we'll continue to see, like we already have seen sponsors come in that want to be there. AutoNation is very like tied in with IndyCar now, very happily so. You've got the same thing with Hy-Vee. You've got similar things happening. We're seeing a change and a shift towards something like a little bit more permanence, but there just wasn't any value in it in the past. And there was no like, what are you going to gain from a Target car, in Canada where there isn't Target?
Sure. Oh, I want to see up in Portland. I'm hoping to see some Portland-based companies like Roman Grosjean sponsored by Stumptown Coffee and Nike. Stumptown Coffee, Nike, and Fred Meyer.
See, that's a good Photoshop right there.
Stumptown Nike. Ooh. So that's fascinating.
So no, this is so interesting just because what I'm realizing now is that IndyCar is the way it is just because of its fractured history, not necessarily because like it was thought that, oh, this would be a good idea because we're at our peak to do this, right? It's all these weird quirks that have like kind of bubbled up to make IndyCar what it is because of that big split in the, I think the 70s you mentioned, and then the kart IRL, because I'm more familiar with the kart IRL split in the 90s. In the reunification 2008 versus the one in the 70s, but that is really cool. That's actually that's why we are where we are, right? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, someone the other day was like, "Why do they call it IndyCar? Like, it's the only racing series where the series is named after the place where it had its big race. Like, it'd be like calling F1 Monaco car." And I was like, it's because they didn't have IndyCar. IndyCar as a concept kind of didn't exist until after they'd been racing there for decades. Like, it'd be like changing F1's name now to something, but like F1 didn't even race Monaco for most of the first 10 years of its existence. So it wasn't like the Indy 500, which was the linchpin of what spawned pretty much all
everything.
American Open Wheel.
I would watch Monte Carlo car. I would watch that. Or
Madagascar.
I would, because I bet they'd actually build a car that can race on that track if they did it that
There
way.
we go.
It might actually be race.
Yes.
Yeah, make narrow and small, like make it smaller and narrow.
Yeah.
And like maybe not as fast, but just like as agile, so that they can actually pass each other and do the whole thing, because Monaco is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And like
This is my pitch. This is my pitch to go watch Formula E. They race the full Monaco circuit now, and it looks freaking sweet to see smaller, slightly less fast cars actually like going side by side around
Yeah.
a hairpin
Mhm.
where you
Yeah.
can't do that in an F1 car
Yeah.
that's like the size of a yacht.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me too. I told Idris this about going to FE. After going to the one race, I'm like, yeah, I'm 100% recommending anybody that can get to an FE race to go, because the thing that shocked me the most, like the moment where I had like my biggest smile after like seeing what was happening, was right in the Portland PIR track. At least for Formula E, there's a split in the grandstands across the front straight where it's just two fences, and then there's the start finish line right there. Like you can just see it. And I went over there, we were walking to our seats and they were doing practice, and I just stopped because you could hear the wind movement and the wine go past.
Yes.
It was so intense. I had to stand there and get a shot and just feel the whoosh. Way more exciting than I thought it was going to be.
I was gonna say, like, I don't think
so
the
exciting.
sound doesn't translate particularly well onto broadcasts, and I will admit
No.
that the sound is not. They need to figure something out with that, the mixing on that. But when you are there in person, you can hear the tires so much more, and that's so freaking cool. And especially when you hear them like go over a chicane, you can hear like the bodywork rattling. Like that, you don't get to hear that normally.
No.
You don't get to hear that kind of thing.
No, and they're so
Freaking
fast.
sweet.
They are so fast. It's so crazy. Like I remember, like didn't you say like the first couple of seasons, like they were not super fast, like they were like kind of quick, but the technology was still hadn't got.
The battery technology wasn't there yet. Yeah.
At this point, I was sitting there, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like these things feel as fast as like watching like an Indy race or like even like an F1 race to a certain extent. It just you the sense of speed is there, and I think that is so exciting, and I love it.
Underrated.
It is very underrated. It is very underrated. I also love the really interesting car manufacturers that are in FE, like Maserati.
Oh yeah,
like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
Yep.
I want to see more of that. I did get a chunk of the Cupra car when it broke its front wing, and it like that was right at where I was. And at the end of the race, people were asking, like, can you break off a chunk? And, like, you know, people were like, the guy, like, the marshal who was taking it home for his garage, he, like, able to break off, like, a chunk of it.
Oh, that's
Although
nice.
I have to touch it with special gloves because the.
Oh, yeah. No, you don't.
I was gonna say, I'm actually kind of surprised they let that happen because in Formula E, they're huge sticklers about recycling that kind of stuff. I learned over the weekend in London that they have a specific allotment of parts that they're allowed to use. So if you break your front wing and it's small enough, you have to fix it. You can't just get a new one, which I didn't realize like was a thing that they were doing. So you at the end of a weekend, there's like usually a part of the garage area where if you walk by it, it's just like the graveyard of bits, like just the carbon fiber just cascaded in there.
Oh, well, okay, that makes it.
They take it, recycle it.
Wow, that makes
That's
it feel
wicked.
even luckier because I was gonna put that in like a shadow box and like have the back of like the poster from. That's one thing, and I was gonna tell you, Elizabeth, too, and I'm gonna like kind of keep an eye out for it. One thing that's really unique about the IndyCar race in Portland, and I was a little disappointed, and Idris can attest to this too, because we were in Portland the past couple of races. They've had a artist do a special poster and T-shirt for the race that's like themed.
Nice.
It has like a Sasquatch in it, and there's like bridges and mountains. They're absolutely gorgeous. And we were assuming that they did that for every race, that they had like a unique poster or a unique like thing. And Ohio's didn't. They had a shirt, but it was just kind of like America's race, 100% 4th of July weekend. And I'm like, okay.
Bang, bang, pow, pow. Right?
Yeah. I mean, the Ohio State flag is kind of cool, and that's what they were sort of trying to go with. But like, I think it could have been done better. Yeah. But I'm really excited to see what Portland does this year. And Formula E for the Portland E-Prix had a really, really awesome poster too, where it was like a car driving into, and there's like the Mount Hood in the background and really stuff. I'll post it.
Nice.
It's absolutely fabulous. But
I fully expect that merch next year. Just so you know.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
Nani?
Nani? Yeah. No.
Good word.
I'm really, really, really excited to see it. I'm absolutely stoked upon that. Well, the next, I guess, the only other thing I was thinking that I wanted to kind of talk about with IndyCar and F1 is, I guess, what are your thoughts about the season thus far? or like kind of how this is going, especially after it's restructuring as it's kind of rebuilding itself. I also want to talk about the Indianapolis 500 too, because that is like the definitive
That's the premier
race.
sport. Yeah, the premier race. Yeah.
It's where it gets its namesake and everything. And I know that like one of the bigger splits from this kart and IRL split is because of like the whole like IndyCar was like, you're not allowed to use the name in kart. Like you can't say Indy at all. That's ours.
Yeah.
And like we're an oval series and they wanted to end it there.
Yeah.
So like, do you feel like, for one, do you feel like the kind of rebuilding is going well? And also, as far as the Indy 500 goes, like, do you feel that it's a series or it's a race that's strong enough to kind of prop up the sport in of itself? Like, do you feel like it would be something that people would like, if things were to completely implode, would people allow that race to not go on if that was the thing that ended up having to happen?
That's a big one. So I do think that IndyCar is in a much healthier place, and it has consistently been growing pretty much every year. The viewership numbers are fantastic, and in part that is because there was that Drive to Survive wave of everyone realizing what F1 was during the pandemic lockdown, and then being like, oh hell, I can't afford to go to Las Vegas or Miami for a race.
Who could go
what
to
else
Las
can
Vegas?
I do?
No one can go to Las Vegas. Yeah.
Like, I guess I can go to the IndyCar race that's like, you know, a couple hours away and costs way less money to go do. And then you get there and you realize how much fun you can have. And how accessible it is. And like, it's still like the viewership is still not quite as robust as it should be, or that I would like it to be. Personally speaking, from my own, like, I've raised this racing series from my own flesh and blood, like my son. I wish it was like, I wish it was bigger, but like, it's been making progress, and I think it falls into the same issues that I think F1 does of like, how do you promote yourself in a way that is relevant to the youth, that is also not like cringe. They had IndyCar had its like Drive to Survive show this year that was called 100 Days to Indy, but it was a cable show that aired every week on the CW. I didn't watch it because I can't be bothered to like tune in every week.
It's the CW also. Like,
it's like when somebody asks
CW.
Yeah.
Hey mom, can we get Drive to Survive? It's like, we have Drive to Survive at home.
The Drive to Survive at home.
Honestly, like, it wasn't, that's not what the sport needs. Like, please log into YouTube and watch Bus Bros. Like, that you have Scott McLaughlin and Joseph Newgarden talking about the races every weekend and capitalizing on the fact that the thing that rules the most about IndyCar is that these dudes are cool. They're fun. You want to just have a beer with them. I want to watch you eat hot chicken.
Idris and I did a meet and greet we did the IndyCar, half the field. They had two lines, and you had to pick which one you wanted to go in. We picked the one that had Roman Grosjean in it, even though,
and Marcus Ericsson.
And Marcus Ericsson, because we were just like, well, that's the one we're going to be. I also got this is my favorite thing. I did not see this in F1. It really bummed me out. They have action figures of the drivers with like their I was like, oh my God, I need a Roman Grosjean action figure. And I got his action figure and then a little thing of his car. Also, by the way, not that expensive. Like, we were talking about affordable. We were talking about the Senna tax that happens. Anything that's Senna related. And like, what was it? There was the same model car, right?
At Coda, at Coda, we were. I really wanted to get the MP4, right? It was like the 92, 93 MP4, right? And it was like the little die cast, probably like a 1/40th scale, something like that. And it was like $250, and I was like, oh. Okay, I'm going to put that one down.
Do I look like I'm made of money?
Yeah.
Jesus.
It was insane. Right. It was insane. And like, part of me was, this is the worst part about it too, right? Because you're at an F1 event and you're like, well, it's a way I might not see this anywhere else. Yeah. So then we go to Mid-Ohio and we see the exact same car there for $40, And that's a no-brainer at that point,
Yeah.
There are dudes that just like have their massive IndyCar memorabilia collections that just set up a tent
every
and
race.
just like, I'm selling this
every race.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm like,
Yeah.
I was maxing my credit card. I'm just like, okay, I need this. Like my girlfriend Lauren, she was a Michael Andretti stan. Like that was like her growing up. Like she was around the Andrettis. Like she'd go to the backstage and all the past. Like I think she has a picture of Mario Andretti like holding her up or something like that. And so like I had to get her like the Andretti car, and I got her favorite driver was Dario Franchitti, or not Dario Franchitti. No, it is. Yeah, Dario Franchitti.
I love Dario.
And so I found like the signature cards that they would do, but they were unsigned. But like I found a couple of those. And yeah, so that was one of the things that I loved about IndyCar was I'm just like, this just feels almost like a farmer's market where a race is happening.
Ooh, that
Because
is a
the
good
vegetables are
Yeah.
like Hot Wheel cars.
The crops are in season.
Yes, there was one tent that we went into that we immediately had to turn around because we were like, oh, it looks like there's NASCAR stuff in here, and then we saw like some Donald Trump members.
It started going. Yeah.
We do get there.
Yeah.
like-
it went left real quick. Yeah.
Well,
But what you were saying about like could the 500 sustain it's I think it could be a single event each year. Like there are enough people who tune in for that single race, who go to that single race, who do things for that single race that like I think it would, if you didn't have the championship to look for, people would still be tuning in and going to that event. Like there's if you've never been, you have to go. You will it feels different than any other race. There's so much like I'm like weeping through the 2 hours of pre-race like celebrations just because I'm like, I know what's coming next. I know the song that's lined up. I know the marching band is coming. I know like, the Gordon Pipers are gonna walk around and I'm gonna be in tears the whole time because like there's just so much meaning that has accrued over the 100 plus years of this race's running. People will flock to that no matter what. You might have people who get turned off if you were to say we're splitting the series into pieces again and also like we're going to have a race that happens at the same exact day at the same exact time up in Michigan as a rival and a screw you to the Indy 500, which is no one's ever going to benefit from. But like if all hell broke loose and it was like the end of everything ever, that race would still go on.
So let me ask this question. What is it about? Because I think for me, growing up, I think one of the, I would see NASCAR come on and I would sit down and watch it sometimes. And, I'm a kid. I'm going to go outside, play basketball, soccer, whatever. I'm like motorsport racing at the age of 6, like, kind of interesting to me, but also like, ooh, basketball. Right. So, I'm sitting down as like a fully capable adult now, capable of thinking and, wondering what is so good about the series. And I see oval racing now, and I think I have a better understanding of why it's so fascinating, right? But what would be like your pitch to why someone should watch an oval race? Because that is what distinguishes, like, I think American open wheel racing more so than other series, right? So what would be, how would you describe that to someone? How would you capture
it's so hard to describe. It's its own beast in so many ways where you can watch a road course race or a street course race and be compelled, but there is something absolutely edge of your seat wild about watching 3 cars in a line going down a straightaway because they're all sucking up each other's air. They're all pulling each other along. The strategy is insane. I think that's something that goes underappreciated is like if you in Iowa, if you pit at Iowa, you could lose 2 laps. It's such a small track that like you're down and everyone will have to pit. But if you have a uniquely slow stop for some reason, that one little mistake has ruined your race. If you've got something big like Indy, you can afford to have a little bit of a longer stop, but also I was talking to Takuma Sato
Yeah.
before the race this year, and he was
Wow.
like, I have this race broken into stages, and by lap 50 I want to be at this point, and at lap 100 I want to be at this point, and then by the end of the race, within the last 10 laps, you have to be in this certain area or it's never going to happen. And
Wow.
if you've done all of the things right to get to that point, you should be there.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, the race is going to throw chaos at you, and it's not going to go the way that you've hoped, but like, there is such a, like, you have to be, you want to be in like 10th for a while, because you don't want to be out in front, because you don't want to be using your fuel, you don't want to
Right.
be using your tires, but you also don't want to be scrapping in 10th. You want to have like a comfortable 10th.
Yeah,
be like pulled along behind someone.
Yep.
There's so much, like, it's so crazy, and like, you just, like, you have to watch it. It's just it's its own thing. And like, open wheel ovals are so different. Like, if you see NASCAR and you think like, ugh, also you're wrong. NASCAR is fun. But the open wheel part, I think because you can't touch wheels, right? You can't, like, there's such a, I don't know, you watch the onboards of the drivers and you see how they're just holding it stiff at the edge. That's insane. That takes so much power, so strength. I've done one IndyCar and oval, my neck hurt after 2 laps. Like, you're just not cut out for the G-forces that are happening there. I've done them at other racetracks and I've been all right. It was just the oval of like, my neck's not cut out for that kind of nonsense.
Right.
You don't have that Fernando Alonso nutcracker neck, right?
I wish.
Oh, that would be a great party trick, though. It's like, especially if you had a Christmas party, and like, although your neck would probably hurt after a while because everybody's having you do it.
Listen, you win some, you lose some. I'm working up all year round just for that.
So here's I have a little NASCAR, like, this is my sort of NASCAR well, it's not really a story, but I will fully admit that at the beginning of my Formula One journey, I was of the, like, NASCAR only goes left, and when they take their tires off, they gotta it's not so slow, and they just go and eat a burger, and then they come in and then they put the that all changed after 2020, because in 2020, one of the things that all the motorsports were doing, Formula One included, were putting old races on YouTube. And so I was watching like old F1 Monaco Grand Prix and all this, and it's all fascinating. And I saw that NASCAR was doing that, and I'm like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, just in the bed, just like contemplating the destruction of the planet. And I thought, you know what?
Just light morning thinking.
It's a good time for NASCAR.
Let's try this. So I'm like, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to watch the Daytona 500s. So I put on the 79 Daytona 500. It's like that first big one. And, oh, man. It was a weird mix of emotions where I'm like, this is so fun. This is so dangerous. This is so terrifying. And then it ends in a fist fight, and I'm like,
it's a triple threat, dude.
and then Richard Petty just like wins it, and everyone's like, oh, because it was like this, it was like a broke like his losing streak, and I'm just like, oh, I get it. And then I just started watching every like year Daytona 500 after it, and I get it. I sort of understand it. It is literally like it might sound kind of cheesy and cliche, but it is really just a bunch of good old boys out there driving cars, and like they're just wrestling with the wheel. Their windshield is covered in oil and dirt and whatever. Yeah. And there's just a guy that shows up with a rag that's just scraping it. They hand him
wipes
like
it down.
A little cup of Mountain Dew. They like chug and like toss out the window. And the guys are like smacking body panels with 2x4s again, and I'm just like, this is awesome.
It's insane.
I'm like, this is like watching Mad Max. Like, I just, I was just so shocked. Like I couldn't believe how much fun I was watching this, and it was just like the sound of the cars too, and just even televised, like watching them all roar past and the speed comparison, and I was convinced. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
This is great. This is fun. And I also recently watched a couple of episodes too, or a couple of things too recently about like the Car of Tomorrow and how controversial that was, and like the Twisted Sisters and like all of that sort of stuff. And I'm like, this is all technical stuff that's super fascinating. Like, what's his face? That guy that had the crab walking car that got banned. I was like, that is awesome. I was like, that's just, who does this? This is amazing. And so I'm convinced. I'm convinced.
I was gonna say, I think like your mindset about NASCAR changes once you've actually started to watch it, but also like as you start to realize, like, it's F1 has always kind of been like who can fudge the rules a little bit, but NASCAR is so much more that you can do with that. There's like not as much oversight. There's not as much like, you know, there is a lot more spec parts than there used to be. And that's just to help lower costs. But like, it's a matter of like how much you can get away with. And I think that like, it's really cool to see that and like how much damage a car can sustain and still manage to finish. Like it's nuts. I recommend everyone like go do that. Go watch the old like ones. Not every oval is a banger. There's a lot of real duds.
Sure.
But like if you can also get there in person, it's a totally wild, unique experience. Like the Indy 500, very big. Go somewhere a little smaller. In Iowa, you can see the whole track. Go to Texas Motor Speedway, I can see the whole thing. Just insane to be able to like, I can watch every car at once. Like, what do I do with my hands? I'm so excited. Everything is happening.
With my hands. I need 2 coffee cups.
Being in that arena too, like the sound just reverberates, right? Where it's just probably it's amplified and it's so much louder, and it's just like roaring in your chest, right? And it's funny. It's like to hear you describe like what it's like at a NASCAR event. This is what kind of bummed me out about Danny Rick not coming over to NASCAR. I felt like he should have done it. You know, like I feel like he would have really enjoyed that. I feel
he's
like
the honorary American.
Yeah, I just feel like he would thrive in that environment. Just that, like, let's just get out there and just swing at a dude after the race. You know?
Oh, dude, Jenson Button had the best time ever. Like, if Jenson Button can just show up and have fun, like, my man.
I know.
Just
right.
Do a little something,
like something, you know.
And those new cars look great too.
Yes.
They look. I mean,
they're sweet.
Yeah, they're sweet as hell. I'm excited. I think that it's weird to say this, but I do believe it. I don't know what you think about this. I don't know if I've actually asked you this question, but I feel like Drive to Survive as an entity of what it is, I think has really started to lift the floor on motorsport
in
across
general.
the board generally.
Yeah.
I think people are now realizing like, oh, there's a lot of drama in this thing. Let's explore. And I think it's kind of lifting the floor. But I almost feel like F1 is like I mean, to me, it feels like F1's the one that's getting the least amount of like real significant lift, only because like people are watching it now and they're just like, this isn't Drive to Survive. And I don't know if that's like the show's fault or the sport's fault. I mean, because this has just always been what it is. Because I mean, like, we've been watching it for multiple seasons now before the show even happened. So yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, what do you think? Like, do you really think that like the Drive to Survive has sort of really kind of pushed the other motorsports more into the forefront, just as an entity, like for alternatives or?
Which one asked you asked?
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, let's start with
Elizabeth.
Yeah, because she's the guest.
You are the guest of honor. Yes.
I do think we've seen such a massively significant boost in that kind of thing, especially when you are here in America. F1 made this like, I don't even want to call it an effort because it wasn't an effort to get more people at the racetracks, but all they did was create 2 races that could have been hosted anywhere because it's just, attended by rich people.
Yeah.
You've got
100%.
like, the racing's not as exciting. You can't actually physically get to a place in person to see this. What else do you do now? Like, if you're really invested in this concept, like maybe it applies in a different series where you can watch something a little bit more compelling or whatever the case may be. And I think people have turned to these other things. Like, it's an off week this weekend for Formula One. What are we going to do?
Right.
Maybe you watch the IndyCar race. Maybe you tune into NASCAR. Maybe you realize like, oh, this is fun. IndyCar. I've got IndyCar up on my phone. Currently,
Yep. See, yeah, of
they're
course.
5 laps to go and they've got a red flag because they had a crash. Like, what are we going to see? What happens? Like,
Right.
I think we've definitely seen this. Like, it just built, and F1 doesn't have anything left to offer. Drive to Survive was like the package, like,
Yes.
the best of the best, the refined, fun, greatest moments of the races of the season, packaged to you in a very easily digestible format. But if you were seeking that out of any race you watched this year, you were going to be sorely disappointed.
Right.
There's a lot happening, but not enough of it is compelling enough to like keep you on the edge of your seat. You have to like be a refined like motorsport connoisseur to understand why it's so important that McLaren has gotten a little bit better and Aston Martin has gotten a little bit worse.
Yes.
If you tune into something like IndyCar, where there's multiple different opportunities for leaders in a race, multiple different winners throughout a season, and even in a season of domination by one driver, Alex Palou,
right,
still tons of other drivers winning, still tons of other competition happening. Like, it's still an exciting thing to be tuning into. So like if you're like looking for that, you've got the excitement, you've got the like Drive to Survive package happening every couple weekends on your TV screen.
Right.
It's more interesting than tuning into F1, waking your ass up at 7 a.m, having a coffee and like being bored to sleep.
Yeah. Because Max passes at the first turn and it's just like
it's over.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
I was
going to say real quick, it's just great that we have so many options for motorsports viewing, right? Like, I think people kind of become like, oh, I watch Formula One and they plant their flag, or I watch NASCAR only. And it's like, no, like you can watch anything, right? It's just kind of like if you watch basketball, football, baseball, whatever, like you can, there's different options, and you might be in the mood for chocolate ice cream today versus vanilla, and that's perfectly fine.
It's
you
true.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's something to scratch the itch for scratch the itch for everybody.
Sometimes you got to get your Monster Jam on. And
exactly.
I 100% watched Monster Jam when I was a kid on television, like on the Speed Channel, because it was what was on, and I'm like, this is awesome. Like just throwing these giant monster trucks at like cars,
and it's
like
gotten even better.
Like
it's even cooler now.
Like I just like this is insane, and I also just like we talked about things like sports not taking themselves seriously. Monster Truck never took itself seriously. It's literally called Monster Truck.
Yeah.
And like the bodies are like, there's like floppy ear, like
lifted
puppies with like a big tongue. Like I love that, and I wish that we got a little bit more of that in Formula One. Which kind of is a little pivot. Before we get to the really fun stuff, I'm excited to get from you, Elizabeth. I do want to briefly talk about the state of the season that we have thus far, and sort of how you're feeling about how things are going. Obviously, the Max domination is happening, but we're seeing McLaren start to kind of make little inroads here and there. I'm Xander Vort's next in a couple of weeks, which is one of my favorite tracks because it's like a roller coaster, and I'm so glad they came back to it.
But okay, I will say what we're not excited about though is that orange smoke, which has been banned, but they don't do anything about. Like I was
going to say, how are you going to stop it?
Like so true, right? And like on one hand, I know we're gonna.
No one's looking in your bags. I went to the Austrian Grand Prix and we brought an entire bottle of champagne into the track with us. No one blinked an eye. No one cared. We popped that bad boy open, shot a cork 50 feet into the air, and the one guy was like, maybe try to hide it, and we were like, we're just gonna drink it. It's gonna be gone.
I think Shinali and Tiernan and Knockoff McLaren said that they would just shove their race suits with like granola
with the water bottle,
snacks, just down there. I think you and I slipped some stuff. Like we realized that they were not actually pulling out our chairs, so we were just like putting water bottles like in the chair thing.
Had like liquid IVs like thrown in the bag and stuff. Like it was hot. That was a hot race weekend.
It was a hot race weekend. again. But yeah, I know that that orange smoke's going to be out there, and I just only wish that it doesn't get so bad that it like causes somebody to like run off track and like crash or something like that. Because I think that's really, apart from like a fire safety hazard, like that's also the concern is like other drivers, right?
And I know we joke about it, but honestly, we're gonna watch replays from like 10, 15 years from now to see like the Max Verstappen or the Fish-Sticks Vanderkamp dominance era. That's what Gabe's brother.
My brother, when he didn't know the drivers, he would come up with names. He's like, "So, how's Fish-Sticks Vanderkamp doing?" Or like, he would call he just because this is what he does. He doesn't know the names of the drivers, so he'd have a whole bunch of them. I'm gonna have to write down all the ones that he said, but
so we'll be watching at the highlights of this era, right? And we'll be seeing the orange smoke and be like, "Oh yeah, that's the thing they used to do. That was kind of cool, right?" Like that's how we'll feel about it 15 years from now. But like now, it's just like, no, it's annoying. I can't see anything. Stop it, you know.
Yeah, done.
Yeah.
I agree. I worry sometimes about F1 and kind of how things are going, only because I know that like people who are just entering the sport now, they're witnessing something that is common, but also at the same time like not common in always the same kind of way. Like the Mercedes dominance felt a little different than the Red Bull does. The Vettel dominance.
I was going to say it was Mercedes, two of them. Red Bull wasn't winning every race. Vettel was still kind of letting people have a chance.
Yeah, it was like Vettel, Weber won some, like Alonso was spoiling the party here and there. Even Lewis had like the occasional McLaren win. But yeah, it just, especially after Belgium, when it came out that they were like sandbagging, they were like slowing down. I'm just like, and also like, I don't know, what do you thought about, did you see Max's comments about wanting to be a solo racer and how like he just prefer to have a bigger gap, and like I don't want to be like around other people when I drive. Like I'd rather just be out there myself, and I'm just like,
hey. I get it, but also my man.
Yeah, it's like my man. Yeah, it's like
sacrifice a little something for the pizzazz.
Like, right. It's like I do you think that Max would ever? I know he said he wouldn't go to IndyCar, but didn't you say he wants to? Didn't he just do iRacing NASCAR all the time? Like, isn't that what he does?
Yeah, he does like Talladega trucks, NASCAR all the time.
That's his thing.
Like apparently it's his thing. This is Alanis has discovered this. So I haven't actually consulted the stats, but I am interested to see, like, does he just like pound that out all the time? Is that just like his thing? And if so, hop on over, my man. We've got plenty of trucks. You can take one.
Just take it. Just do it.
Yeah, I think like to skip a weekend, like you don't need it. You're cool. Like you're fine.
You're cool.
After Singapore, when you win in Singapore, which I'm fairly certain is going to happen, just call it quits. Just go do a NASCAR.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think even Vettel, I remember it's like thing even when winner usually gets crowned, the races that come after that, they usually don't perform as well as they used to. Like, it's not like a sure thing. I know like Hamilton and Vettel definitely won races after. Yeah. But I do remember things where like Vettel like was, maybe had like a couple, like a third place finish or like a fourth place finish, just because he's just kind of like, well, okay, like, I'm going to do it. But
let off the gas a bit.
Maybe like their heart's not completely into it anymore. But I'm still holding on to that F1, but I will tell you, like, IndyCar has definitely really got me excited, and I'm definitely a fan, and I'm still a Roman Grosjean fan here. I still want to hold on to him. I really hope that he at least gets maybe one win this season to kind of keep his seat. Idris, like, was there any we did a little bet in Mid Ohio for like $1 of who was going to finish like the highest.
I ended up winning that. I think I picked Scott Dixon.
Because you picked Scott Dixon, so of course you're going to.
Hey, we were picking drivers based on the livery. It was nothing else.
Our buddy
just happened to pick like the best guy in the field. No big deal.
Our buddy Jaco picked Marcus Ericsson because he didn't know,
and yeah, he was like,
hey, you want to pick another one?
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to keep that one?
Yeah.
You want to back up
Right. Yeah, it's like we'll give you. I told him
Yeah.
I'll give you double odds to pick somebody else. He's just like, no, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Bless
Well,
his heart.
Idris,
Yes.
did you
Yeah.
have anything else that maybe you wanted to talk to Elizabeth about? Because I'd love to get to the FUFO games.
Yeah. No, I guess okay. So this is the one last question about IndyCar because you're just such a wealth of knowledge about this. And
Yes.
we're so glad to have just pick your brain about this. As far as IndyCar is concerned, right? So I think it's like NTT, right? The Japanese telecommunications companies, like now like the title sponsor. Like, what do you think? What is the one thing you would do to help IndyCar just make that push into the next level, right? To become the like premier like motorsport that everyone watches.
So I think IndyCar still gets a little too wrapped up in a certain trying to please a certain subset of American motorsport fans who have certain ideas about how the series should be run or certain ideas about the way that the history of motorsport here has gone.
Yeah.
You still have a lot of people that retain this mindset of, we want to, preserve certain things. We want to exclude certain people. I think what we need to do is have IndyCar kind of set a goal for the future of like redefine itself, because it certainly seems like we're accepting a lot of these European drivers and we want to have them here, but we're also still positioning ourselves as a primarily like American motorsport. If you allow that to become a little more international, you then begin to have a much more growth on a broader spectrum.
Yeah.
There's so many people I know now who are tuning in and watching IndyCar, people who've never done that before because they they're into F1, but they want to see something different and something new.
Yeah.
This is the time where you can leverage that. And I think there's still so much work that can kind of be done with like social media.
Yeah.
And putting together like interesting packages. You've got some teams that are so great at it. Like Arrow McLaren, honestly, their stuff is fantastic.
Yes.
You get certain things, certain bits. Yes. You get certain bits from NBC, the broadcaster, but like some of them are also real duds and like cringe. I feel the same way about F1, where it's like people need to have, these series need to have like a committee of people who like know what the fans want.
Yes.
Because I don't know how many decisions in motorsport get made by someone who's actually gone out and tried to talk to people, because I try at every race I go to like ask people about their experience and what they're enjoying and why they're here and what made them pick this, and like, are they happy? Are they spending too much money? Like, what is the situation? How are you feeling about your decision to be here at the racetrack today? And why do this on a Sunday instead of something else?
Yeah.
I feel like you really need to do that, because then you'll realize how many people are like, I just showed up because of Drive to Survive and now I'm becoming a big fan. Well, we can leverage something of that. Like, there used to be this absolutely ridiculous, I used to just make, but I actually think they took it quite seriously. IndyCar did Indy Rivals. There was something like that happened on track. They'd try to like blow it up a little bit and like make videos of it. And it was kind of funny. And like, just because I think they were taking themselves a little seriously, but there's such an opportunity to like do things with that go beyond just like, we have a rivalry. Like, make them arm wrestle. I don't care. Do something.
Mud pit.
Do something different,
Some hog wrestling.
I think honestly, foot race. Awesome. Like, there's so much that I think is still left to be done, especially in the social media part, which is primarily how people are engaging with IndyCar, especially the overseas people. Like, it's not super easy to just like turn on a race. You have to kind of hunt for it. A lot of people turn on their VPNs and stuff like that. So I think there's more to do there, and I don't think IndyCar has been ready to tackle that. That's a big thing, but we're getting to the point now where it's like, come on.
You're
here. Like, you do a little thing and you'll be like, it'll be different.
Well, while we're on the subject of inclusion as well, with the fans, I also want to kind of touch a little bit on specifically F1 and IndyCar when it comes to the sort of the bringing in of drivers from different diverse backgrounds, but also of women drivers. there we saw the whole thing with Danica Patrick, which on the most inappropriate moment for you to say the things you're going to say to a little girl asking about it.
Cheesy Pete's, what a mess.
I mean, you know, what's going on here? My girlfriend has very strong opinions about Danica Patrick, and I'm not gonna. I'll leave those to her what she's gonna say. But
we'll talk about it after the recording.
The one thing that really bothered me, it's just like a lot of people were saying that I think like you said as well, that the averages of numbers of women who are involved in motorsport wanting to be there are not as high as men. So like that already is a barrier that we can understand. But where the weird part that started to get to me though, that I think a lot of people too, was when she talked about the mental thing, the mental side of it, having some aggressive mentality, and also to a certain extent the physical side of it. Because the first person that came to my mind was Michelle Mouton, who was the Group B rally car driver for the Audi rally cars. Right. Like, if you know anything about Group B, you know that these were arguably some of the most difficult and physically demanding vehicles to drive in motorsport history ever. And she still won 4 races and had multiple like podiums from it. And so when I see somebody like that, I think it is not a impossibility. Right. They there might be some more work that gets involved, but it's not that it's to say that they can't because of these reasons is wrong. Yeah, because it's just a matter of trying to work towards getting to like anybody else. And like when I see somebody like Yuki Tsunoda, who's like, didn't you say he's as tall as you are?
Yeah, he's he's a little boy.
He's a little guy. Like, and he can drive an F1 car. Like, I know that there are women in motorsport who are definitely taller and probably have a bit more muscle density than Yuki Tsunoda is, that would be able to drive an F1 car no problem. So I guess like where are sort of both of you? Let's start with Elizabeth. Like, kind of where are you sort of with that at this point after all of that?
I'm still very frustrated by it, but also about to possibly break your heart and say Michelle Mouton has said very similar things to what Danica said.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
Yeah, women do not have, and I think they're just so close to getting it. It's like one more step. Why aren't women generally in these roles? It's because we are socializing women to prioritize much different things. We're implementing a certain mentality in the way we raise our boys versus our girls. Yes. We're giving opportunities in certain things to boys versus girls. Like this is a thing where it's like, it's not just a biological deterministic issue. It's a very cultural one in terms of like how you are as a person, and how you are raised as a person. I grew up around cars. Like, it never really occurred to me that I wouldn't be able to be involved in motorsport in some form or fashion. Like, I didn't want to be a racer. I don't have I get stressed out like going on the highway. I'm not cut out for it. Like, that's just who I am as a person, you know? Like, that wasn't because I was raised to think that only boys could do that. It was like, I could do it if I wanted to. I just have to be on anti-anxiety medication. Yeah. You know, that kind of stuff where they're so close to it where they're like, I'm just built different. You know what I mean? Like, you can say that, but like, why? You know what I mean? Like, Danica, why are you in your aggressive kill mindset? Like, why are you that person as opposed to your friends? And why are they the people they are? There's a lot of reasons and a lot of cultural, you know, situations that come and back this up that are going to enlighten you. You know, it's not just like, you know, the one chromosome you have like determines this. Like, that's what's determining your skill as a person, as a race car driver, your capabilities as a human being. It has given you some shape and some experiences, and that's about it. The rest of it is determined by how you're raised.
Right.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot just with diversity and inclusion just across the board, right? Like, specifically when it comes to like race-based and gender-based stuff, it is infuriating how frequently you encounter that mentality of just like, oh, well, we would expect this. And it's like, you're
Yeah.
like, just like you said, like, dude, you're almost there. Now let's ask the why.
so close.
Let's ask the why
Yeah.
part of that question, and like then you take a step back, right? And you're like, oh, now I understand, right? And it's just, especially when it's people who are in those positions, who are of those groups that they're criticizing, that it's like you know the answer. You know, like I want to shake you and just say you know what the answer is, and it's really disheartening when comments like that are made because it, like that, those people in particular have the power to go ahead and then change it to help change the system in some way, shape, or form, right? And I think on one hand too, this is something else Gabe and I talk about a lot. Like, I think this is why it's a little disheartening to also see like the FIA not really like broadcast like Driver Academy or F1 Academy, right? And it was the same with the W Series too, right? It's like we have these things, these awesome platforms and everything, right? And then you just completely bungle them. Where the, you know, like for as many Ferrari thirst traps we get of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz getting in an ice bath, where the like the photos, not thirst traps, where are the photos of like Marta Garcia, like just where
she
the photos
exists,
doing
like, can you prove it?
It's crazy. It's like, where's Waldo with these drivers sometimes? And it's absurd.
Yeah, our Instagram, like, we followed like all the like Formula One Academy drivers, so we could like get all of the like behind the scenes stuff that we can, as we could consume them and things of that nature. And honestly, like, it is super, from the bits that I've been able to see, like the race replays I've been able to see, those weekends that they race, like there's like 3 races involved.
Nuts.
And they're like, you know, I think the cars could be a little bit quicker, but there's still some really hard racing going on. There's so many different winners, and like it seems like Marta Garcia is like, she's like right with Alex Palou and Max Verstappen, just like cleaning up the field for the most part.
Status.
Yeah.
But I'm also like really excited. I like Lena Buller a lot. She's really delightful, and she's been doing really, really well too. And you know what? You talk about IndyCar, all the drivers being like friends and like being together. You get that from the F1 Academy. They're all like just seem to be like really close friends. They're hanging out with each other. They're doing a lot of like good PR together. Sometimes in the F1 stuff, they'll have them like, you're gonna do this thing today, and you can tell like they've got other stuff that they want to do, and they're just kind of like, okay, I guess we'll play Scrabble.
There for the paycheck.
You know? Like,
yeah.
Like,
Charles Leclerc, he was second in the championship battle last year.
Yeah.
Whoop, whoop. All right, hello,
Jesus.
cool.
F1 tries too hard, and I think that's the thing. It's like Indy, because it's such a kind of like a ragamuffin of a series at this point in a lot of ways, that it's just like there's that endearing charm. It's kind of like a dog that's just kind of flops all over and just kind of falls into a wall, and you're like, oh,
scrappy.
you're cute. You're a little scrappy. Let's go. We're good, you know? Yeah. No, I 100% agree with Idris. I really wish they would put. Hopefully they do, because I know their next year F1 is getting more involved with F1 Academy, and hopefully that will mean they'll put those races out for people to see. That's more accessible. Because I'd love to watch like a full race from start to finish without just having to watch a highlight reel.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
be nice.
Yeah,
a girl can dream.
A girl can dream. Well, Idris, do you want? Would you like to start conducting our FUFO party games segment?
I was actually about to say this is a good segue right into some party games. So here on FUFO, we like to do a thing where we just dive deep into who you are as a person, and get your picks on driver songs, and get an idea of what you would pick as your Formula One sponsor team. So for folks that are, if this is your first time hearing this, so we sent over like some examples of like what we would think like a good title sponsor team name would be for an F1 team, and I think we put Olive Garden Pennzoil. That was the one that just popped in mind. I would love to see that one Photoshop personally. When you hear your family.
It started, I think, because they started like you and I did this when we were talking about what was it? We were talking about, I forget what episode it was, but we were creating our Dream F1 season.
Yeah, Dream F. Yeah.
And so we created our own, like, if we had a team, what our sponsors would be and what our drivers. Mine was Totino's Monster F1.
Yeah. Which is not Tostino's. We thought it was Tostino's for the longest time. I always thought it was Tostino's.
There's no S?
There's no S. There's no S.
It's a Midwestern
This
thing.
is like a Bernstein Bear thing.
Yeah. So I'm convinced, because you're from Michigan, right?
Yeah.
And you
I was going to say, we add the S on it, like when you don't go to Kroger, you go to Kroger's.
You go to
That's exactly right.
You put the S in there.
Yes.
when I was in Columbus with Idris, we went to Aldi, but I called it Aldi's.
I call it Aldi's. I call it Aldi's.
Yeah,
Kroger's.
but it's just Aldi.
Yeah. Walmart's.
Girl, there was like a little store, a little local one called Jack's. It was Jack apostrophe S. My grandma called it Jax's. Like she just got the other one in.
That's amazing. Yeah, it must be because that's hilarious. But yeah, so I'm gonna call it then. You know what? It's Tostino's F1.
Tostinos.
We'll make it that way.
And then Idris, you had Julian Palmer and Jensen Button.
Oh yes.
What was it?
Yes.
Taco Bell.
Sega. Yeah, come on, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Sonic running fast with the Crunchwrap Supreme.
And that's right.
I absolutely turfed it on a bird scooter in front of Julian Palmer, so that's like my claim to fame.
What? Oh,
I still have the scar.
Oh, jeez.
Was there any reaction?
Did he help
from him?
you? Like, did he notice what happened?
He thought it was the funniest thing he's ever seen in his entire life, which honestly it really was.
I love that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you got hurt. That is great.
Hope it wasn't a serious injury.
My first time on a bird scooter. Nah, I was fine. I was fine. My first time, couple drinks down, I was so confident.
Okay.
I was like, Jolien believes in me. I can do this.
I love it. Yeah. Okay. Well, Idris, go for it. Which one should we start with?
So without further ado, because so we follow you on IG and your socials, so we know that you're a big music head. And
I love all of your hair metal and F1 posts. I get excited every time I see them. Like Dockin,
Gabe and I are big music heads. Like we just have a mutual love of music, and I mean we played in a band together, right? So
we did.
Like it's always been a thing of just like, yo, I just found this new track, and he's like, bro, and I'm like, bro, so.
Idris has a poster of us behind him.
Oh yeah.
It's
is that y'all?
That's a fake band actually.
Yeah, it's a fake band. Yeah. Our buddy Damon Marcus Smith, we had on our podcast. He was kind of the band leader. And he was doing he was doing like video stuff, like, and so they were doing a movie where it was the 90s, but because they couldn't do any real bands, he had to make fake band posters. So after band a fake grunge band called Divinity.
Yeah.
And we just like made a whole ethos, but we put the posters behind us on stage or like on our merch table, and people would be like, "What's Divinity?"
We're just like, band?
We don't want to talk about it.
They look really good.
But
we just like real nice sepia tone, real moody.
Right. So like we created a driving playlist, and then we added Shanali and Tiernan when we had them on. They added to the playlist. Yes. So we have a running Spotify playlist that I'm going to post. But what we're going to do is we want to get your top 5 driving songs, and we're going to add them to our playlist so that we can just continue to add to our like just ultimate driving list.
So we would love to hear your top 5 songs, or if you have more than 5, please.
Yeah,
please
get some honorable mentions in there. We're 100% down.
I have about 1,000, and it depends on the vibe.
Let's go.
Okay. All right.
So my first one, number 1, always number 1, Dance Night Away by Van Halen. My absolute favorite song in the universe. So that's my favorite, like, windows down, having a great day, driving song.
Nice. Okay.
Number two, Lose My Mind by Bass Drum of Death, because that's just a driving fast song. That's the 85 mile an hour toll highway. Number 3, We Die Young by Alice in Chains. That one was such a banger. Such a banger.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh my God. I love that song so much. It's one of those ones where
nighttime
you hear
driving song.
Oh yeah. It's one of those ones you hear it and you just throw the stink face. Like,
yeah.
I saw somewhere they said like the biggest compliment that you could give a guitar player while he's playing is,
oh yeah.
I get that face. Like if I'm playing some riff and somebody comes up to me and just like,
what you're playing is so filthy that
you gotta scrunch up.
Yep.
Your face just goes, oh yeah, love it. Okay, that's perfect. I'm excited. Okay, all right. Number 4.
Number 4.
What do we got?
Number 4, Minerva by Deftones.
Okay. Ooh,
one of my current favorites for just like highway. Number 5, Muscle Man by the Ty Segall Band. That whole album is great. Slaughterhouse, highly
Okay.
recommend.
Nice.
Listen to that one all the time. But yeah, those
Love
are
it.
like my big ones at the moment. It also just depends on like what the vibe is.
Sure.
Sometimes
Gotcha,
I just
yeah,
want to
yeah.
sing along to Def Leppard, and I have that. I had like
Yeah.
the greatest hits of Def Leppard was my like driving soundtrack for
Yeah.
all of last fall.
Mhm.
Like
Awesome.
for months at a time. I'm like, I'm
Love
just
it.
gonna put Hysteria on and see where
Mhm.
the vibe takes me. It's gonna take me the same 6 songs over and over again.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't care because I'm having the time of my life.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I'm still 100% on a. I have a friend who runs a record shop, and I need to get a copy of High and Dry and a copy of Pyromania. Those are like must-have Def Leppard records for me.
Mhm.
Just so
Mhm.
perfect. Pyromania is, I think, is my favorite Def Leppard record. I just from start to finish.
I'm a big fan of their first. Like
Yeah.
I'm a big
Mhm.
first album person for some reason.
Mm.
Almost every band I like. The first album that they came out with is like the one that I like the most because
Yeah.
it feels like it was the rawest version of what they were and what
Oh
they
my
wanted,
God.
like the punk version.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, as we get like there, no shame against the more refined things that have come out in later days, but like also that for some reason, almost every band that first album is like that's the one.
This is so
I can
funny
feel that.
because like literally, Gabe and I were having this conversation. I said, dude, I don't know what it is, but I cannot listen to like a band's album or like a rapper's album past the second or third album. Like I just fall off. I don't know what it is for those exact same reasons. Because like first is punk, then the second one is like, oh, they've refined it, and then maybe the third one they kind of like hit like the like I guess their stride and like it feels really good. But then after that, I don't know what it is.
There's some very rare exceptions to that rule for me, at least.
Yes.
So the one big one that I can think of is Foo Fighters. I love Foo Fighters' first record. That I love that record. I learned to play like back and forth. It was just such a important record to me. It was the first record that I actually listened through like straight through and didn't feel like skipping anything, which is like really big. And like Foo Fighters had like a really solid run of records throughout like into the early 2000s, and then like, but it kind of felt like, well, like they're all really good, but like nothing felt really super special until Wasting Light happened. Then that record to me was, I was like, oh, like this one almost from start to finish is just like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And I think the other one for me would probably be like bands like Van Halen. It's like their first record is perfect, but then like 1984 happens and it's just some next level shit, and you're like, oh come on, you know. So yeah, but I would mostly agree. I like, speaking of Jamiroquai, I recently went back and listened to his first record, and I'm like, oh, so this is what Gran Turismo ripped off for their menu music. It's literally that. It is just the whole time I'm just like, oh
Yeah.
hello. They have like these little things like that, or like with the guitar in there. I'm like, oh yeah, I heard that on Gran Turismo 4. Like, it's just my brain had a little unlock moment. It was incredible.
I love that.
Yeah.
Memories.
Yes.
Memories.
All
Okay,
right,
well that's
do you
perfect.
have-
We're definitely adding those to the playlist.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. I was gonna see if you had any honorable mentions.
Honorable mentions. Oh, it's so hard because like, so I do seasonal playlists, and I had a friend who like turned me onto this years ago. So like every season I get a new one going where it's like the things I'm listening to on repeat, I keep them and like, you know, move on to the next season. So it's really fun for me to be able to like go back and be like, what was I listening to in the summer of 2016? I've got my whole playlist, and then I like revive the vibe. So like right now it's just a mess. Like Art of Dying by George Harrison has been like a top play for me recently. For like that song just like got me. But also when I was in England, I was watching like a Top of the Pops recaps of like when they pick a band and then like show all of the like things.
Yeah.
So for some reason now I'm real into hot chocolate. Like that's just vibing with me at the moment. There's that, then there's George Harrison, then there's like, you know, some black metal, because like who doesn't need a little bit of yelling in their life? It's just it's all over the place at the moment. We're just all over.
Yeah, some of my more stronger musical memories have actually happened in the car.
Oh,
and,
absolutely.
Mine too.
yeah.
Too.
Yeah, because I think it's just one of those moments where you get that moment of solitude and you're doing something that you're disassociating from because you're just driving, and you have the only really kind of connection you have to sort of like your humanity sometimes in those moments are like listening to like a song. And I remember the couple of like one moment I remember specifically when it comes to like heavy metal is I listened to, my brother told me to listen to Meshuggah. And I'm like, okay. And I listened to the song Bleed for the first time and I was driving home from like hanging out with Idris. It literally gave me a headache, but in like the best way possible. And I'm just like, ow, awesome. You know?
Yeah.
Those are just the best. Like I recently too, I heard a David Bowie song I haven't heard in a long time. What is it? Fame. Fame. What's your name?
I love
I heard that and I was thinking, oh yeah, this reminds me of driving down to Nashville, Tennessee with my mom because we bought a CD. It was like the 70s greatest hits, but when we put it on, it was all covers. And so my like 20
so funny.
my like 2000 and what was it like 2008 self was like, okay, I'm gonna go on LimeWire and download all of the real versions of this and put it on a mix CD, and that's exactly what I did, and we just listened to that on repeat. It had like 3
that's amazing
songs in America. It was great. I love that. I love that vibe. That's
I was
great.
gonna say,
I'm
like,
gonna try that.
the reason I picked my Alice in Chains song was because like my dad used to make mixtapes. That's what we listened to. We just like go cruise around. There's like 3-year-old me. Like I have these distinct memories of going to visit my mom at work. She worked the night shift at an ER, and we would like stop by the beach, and it's like October, and we were listening to Alice in Chains. I can remember it so clearly, and I was like imagining like creatures running through the fields because like the song was scary.
Yeah. No, those are the best kind of memories too. You have that song memory. Idris, do you have anything like that, like in the car, like with your parents or anything? Like,
let's see, a lot of Lucky Dubé. So yeah, my parents listen to a lot of like reggae and like West African high life music. So Lucky Dubé is one of their favorite artists, and so I hear like a lot of, anytime I hear like his like specific style of sound come on, it'll be like a rim drum, like boom, you know, and then that like I feel that like you get transported, and then suddenly I go from the driver's seat to the back right of the car, and I'm just like there with my seatbelt and like eating my cheeseburger and chicken nuggets, you know what I mean? And it's like out of body. And anytime I hear that, like the nostalgia is just so overwhelming, and like how music will just overtake you completely, like memory wise, and will just transport you. It's wild. Like the fact like you were 3 and you remember feeling like there were scary monsters on the beach. That is like what?
I know.
Yeah.
Like I shouldn't. There's so many of those. Like I grew up. Van Halen was my dad's favorite band. That's why it's my favorite band. Like I remember so distinctly, like moments where I listened to a song, and it's like I am like 2 years old in the house we used to live in before we moved to the house that I actually remember living in. But I can remember like little bits of that because of just the song that we were listening to. It's just it's crazy.
I remember the first as a guitar player, you always remember the first time you heard Van Halen's Eruption. And I remember distinctly it was another LimeWire or FrostWire that moment where my brother downloaded it. He played it for me and it blew my mind, and we were on the way to like to go to Applebee's or something for dinner, and it was just stuck in my head, and I'm like, how did he make his guitar sound like
what
that?
did he do? I had that exact same thing, but like I had that with Cathedral, where I was like, how is this a guitar that made like that was my favorite song for like years, because I just couldn't comprehend how a guitar made this noise. Like I was obsessed with it. I learned how to play guitar trying to like figure out how to make those sounds. Never got there. But
that's
same
awesome.
thing. Like just hold on to it.
100%. Yeah.
Do you still play and keep up to this day?
No, I had to leave a lot of guitars behind when I moved to Texas, and that kind of killed my vibe for me.
Gotcha.
So I spent a real long time building a exact replica of Eddie Van Halen's Frankenstein
guitar. Oh yeah. I figured
to the point where he had quarters on the back of that guitar that were just like, I sourced the exact year
1975
because like I hunted those bad boys down to put them on there, and then I couldn't bring them with me, so I was like, it kind of killed it for me, which was really
That's
sad.
some dedication.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I know.
Yeah, only
But
the
that's legit,
hardcore Van Halen fans do the Frankenstrat thing, and very few of them go to the extent of actually sourcing
the quarters,
from that year to do it.
Which probably costs you more than the quarter itself.
What I appreciate though is that you're doing it for the like aesthetic recreation of this thing, of this person that you love, whereas every other guitar guy out there thinks it's the secret to like playing his tone. It's just like, dude, no, practice. Like that's what you need.
Those stripes, those are go fast stripes. Your fingers go fast.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. Oh, I love the story behind that. Too. We could, Lance, you and I, or Elizabeth, you and I could have an entire whole podcast probably just about Van Halen stuff. I guarantee, because there's just so much that you could talk about.
Dig into the lore.
Van
just
Halen
dig
or
into
F
the
off,
lore, the Van Halen lore.
So coming soon from Neon Kids Media. So we do want to get your picks for your title sponsors for your F1 team. So and also your drivers, so you can pick up primary, secondary, and reserve driver.
So the scene is set. It is the beginning of the 2040 season, and lining up along the pit box is Taco Ball F1 and Totino's Monster F1 are alongside on both sides. The race is getting ready to start. You're about to unveil your car like they used to at the beginning of the year at the first practice session or whatever.
Similar to a team, Rich Energy. I don't know if you've heard of them. But.
Who are the drivers?
Those little guys.
Yes, just that little. Yeah. Who are the drivers sitting on the tires? What is the sponsor? And also, what era of F1 car does this look like?
All right. I've got a whole scenario in my head of how I'm imagining this.
Let's do this.
Specifically, I want my car to be the Lotus 72 from the early 1970s. Because I think that thing looked so sick. It kind of looked like a cheese grater and also a little bit like a hatchet. But it was the coolest looking thing I've ever seen. Has to be my car. Has to be my car. I'm picturing myself. I'm not a big name sponsor. I'm a privateer. Okay, I'm a privateer coming out here.
Okay.
And we're showing F1 who's boss, and I'm calling my team the Republic of Texas Racing Enterprises. Okay. A whole thing. My sponsor is going to be Texaco because, of course, it is. You got to get that fuel somewhere.
100%.
All right. And maybe a makeup sponsor or something. I don't know. Something for the ladies. Something like my other interests. You know what I mean?
Okay. All right. Yeah, sure. Yeah, Texaco Revlon.
I like it.
Exactly.
It's got a good ring
Peter
to it.
Revson, but I'd have Peter. I considered having Peter Revson as one of my drivers actually, but I went against it because he wouldn't have gotten the Revlon money because he had a falling out with his family. So instead, I am picking. I got too into this. You sent me this, and I was
you got just as into it as you needed to be.
Yes,
as much as we needed you to be. Yes,
I was on my plane home from England, dreaming up a scenario of no, I can't have Peter Revson because historically it wouldn't work, and I picked drivers that historically don't work with my era anyway.
Sure,
it's fine.
I love it.
I have to have Janet Guthrie because she was the freaking coolest. She's the dream of my dream team. You know what I mean? First woman to race in the Indy 500, first one in the Daytona, not first in the Daytona, but all of that stuff where she's just kicking butt, taking names, best finish was 6th in the 500, which is still a record. She have to be there. We're going in overseas. We're going international. Yeah. And also for the Texas roots, for the Texas girls, I want to pick Dan Gurney, but I don't want to ruin what Dan Gurney had. I think Eagle was its own thing that's worth keeping. So I'm bringing over AJ Foyt. AJ Foyt, my Houston main.
Okay.
Whoa. Okay.
I just want to see him cause some chaos. I want to see AJ Foyt show up on the F1 circuit in like the Nürburgring and just have some things to say. Like hash it out with the guys.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great.
Yeah, AJ Foyt he was a firebrand, wasn't he? He was out there. He was just like, oh yeah. I saw like a thing where what was it? There was some Indy race where, or no, was it a NASCAR race? No, it wasn't an Indy race. And it was the wrong people were on the podium because they didn't count the points right. And somebody was just like, you learn to count or something. And then he just shows up and starts smacking the guy in the face.
Insane. That would not happen. Yeah. Could you imagine that happening on the F1 like paddock? Christian Horner just like Toto. Just like...
Here's the thing. If we'd had AJ Foyt in 1972, that could be a thing that we do now. And I think F1 would be all the better for it.
Yeah. Well, the closest thing we've had to like a fist fight recently was Max going after Stebby after
Esteban Ocon,
yeah. Like I remember seeing that
a few years back.
Oh. Yeah, that like usually with F1 drivers, it feels like more like just words. Well, we also had George Russell smack Bottas's helmet after they got that crash in Imola.
Oh,
remember that?
Really funny. Yeah.
So like that was like a thing, you know, like
weird.
They get a little testy sometimes, you know.
They do.
Like, I almost feel like they should have like a timeout corner segment where they have the drivers like face each other in Mario Party or something like that and just get their aggressions out in a safe way.
What, and further fracture their relationships in Mario Parties? I think not.
It's over.
Here's the thing though. Like Idris, I think you and I have talked about this. Who's your go-to Mario Party character? Mine is Monty Mole. 100%. He is always the MVP for me. Elizabeth, who's your Mario Party character? Also, what is your Mario Kart combination? Like who, like driver and kart?
You're asking a lot of someone who doesn't play video games.
Okay.
No, it's okay. I have a Mario Party character.
Okay.
Which is the little ghosty.
Oh yes.
The little ghost.
Oh yes.
Because he's cute.
That's perfect. Yeah. Is
it.
Is it King Boo's?
Yeah.
King Boo.
King Boo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
I play King Boo and we do that because the only time I played one video game like in my whole life, and that was Animal Crossing, and from day one, like all through the iterations. So I really only play other things when I'm hanging out with my sister. I'm always King Boo or some other like cute villain. Doesn't matter. Okay. I'll be one of like the things that
the cute villains
is bad for me. Yeah. And then
that's perfect.
Mario Kart. I just kind of pick a putzing about vehicle and hope for the best because I don't know how to go fast.
Got it.
If I go too fast, I go crash it.
Yep. No.
Well, you can play King Boo, so that works. You could just choose him. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect.
That's it. That's all I need.
Okay. Well, I can tell you, I am very excited to put together your Photoshop of your racing team.
Oh yeah.
I know exactly what the car is going to look like too. I have it in my head. So just be ready for that.
Nice.
Yeah, my thought is to just have as big of a grid as possible. As we gather up our interviews of people on the pod. And I just wanted to say too, just to as a personal note, I'm really excited. I'm really glad that you were able to come on the pod with us. Like Idris and I initially, like when we like came across you, like and Alanis like through DRS, and then we read your book, like we were just stoked.
Like I have to say, by the way, like we didn't get a chance to really say this at the top of the pod, but yeah, like the way you write your articles, like your social media posts, the book, all of it's so great, and we really appreciate like the voice you bring to all of this, and it really. It helps to bring in people who typically have not really been in the sport, right? Like I can come in and you break it down in a way that makes sense to me, the way I understand things and interpret things. So just keep doing you. It's excellent, Thanks. Keep rocking out to hair metal. Keep posting pictures of your cats, amazing,
Yes. Yes. Oh yeah. How are you collecting more? Because you're doing at your house, right?
Yeah, I live out in the kind of the middle of nowhere in Texas, so there are a lot of feral cats that just show up on the porch. So I fed them, keep an eye on them, make sure they're all right. The first one I just brought in because I thought she was cute. and she let me pick her up after a couple tries, bring her in.
Yeah.
I trapped the next one, Joseph, because it was getting hot outside and he was very fluffy. So my husband put out a trap for him to bring him in. So he's been in here.
He's
there
my
was
favorite.
Papa. Joseph's so cute. There's a big Papa. Papa he looked like he was doing fine, so I didn't bother like trying to bring him in. And then he was limping, and I saw him limping for like a week. Couldn't get him, and then opened the door, and I could hear him crying under the car when I went to go get the mail. And I was like, "Little man, just come on in." And he like, I got a bag of treats, and he just walked in and sat down on the floor.
Nice.
So he got bit by a snake, but not a poisonous, venomous snake. So he's all good.
Okay.
It was just infected. That was it. Just had to take care of that. Now he's a little asshole running around loving me so much. And then our most recent one is Mama. My husband got her as well. She's like, she's having a rough time, but she's very like just a couple months old still. Doesn't really know what to do. She's still figuring things out. So she's out separated from the other ones while we get her vaccines and get her all sorted out. But they're all the gang's all here. Like I think I've got all of them now.
That's so sweet. I love
beautiful.
that. Yeah, I love watching the journeys of like seeing you like interacting with each of them and like, you know, the little progresses that you have. It reminds me of there's a lady, she is the daughter of one of the guitar players from Styx. I think her page is like Kitten Lady or something like that. And her whole thing is like teaching people how to like deal with kittens, how to like handle like medical problems, how to like, you know, look out for certain signs, and like she's just always posting adorable cute kittens that she's fostering. And I just my god, I love it. I miss kittens. I love kittens so much.
To all the listeners, you guys didn't expect us to give you like a whole cat nation, you know, portion.
I mean, how are we gonna, here's the thing, how are we going to have Elizabeth on the podcast without talking about Van Halen or cats at some point? It's
like those are my things.
Yes,
those are like the two core foundations of who I am as a person.
Right, 100%. Well, on that subject, Elizabeth, obviously you and Alanis co-wrote a book, Racing with Rich Energy.
Yes.
Which
excellent
is
book,
spectacular. And like Idris said, my most favorite thing about it is the fact that you are able to write in such a way that even if you're not a motorsport fan, you understand what's happening. Yeah. Because if you introduce a subject or some concept, you explain it like immediately after, and that's so awesome. What are there any other like projects, any other things that you're doing that you are excited for, that you could kind of like tell everybody to kind of check out and get excited for, that you have going on in your own life?
Yeah, the big one is Donut Racing Show, which is available anywhere you get podcasts. We primarily talk about F1, but we do have some fun interviews coming up with non-F1 drivers, which is very going to be exciting. And also I have a Substack, Grand Prix Gastronomy.
Yes.
I cook my way through every race on the Formula One calendar, and it is very fun. So I would just come hang out while I try to figure out how to use a knife, and no pressure.
I love it.
Amazing.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a chef or anything by any means. I've screwed up quite a few of these, mostly because I don't know how to read a recipe. But like it makes it fun and makes it way more down to earth, I think. Yeah. And I've learned a whole lot just in doing it. So even if you just like come to watch someone's foibles, like perfect place to do it.
Right. Which one of those were you or are you most and least excited to make?
That's a good question. Most excited, I think, were the Italian ones, the two. I've done both of them. Sambanza was a risotto, and then the Imola was a ragu. And like I just because I don't ever both of those things are things that take a while, so I never really like put that much time into making a sauce or whatever. Sure. Those I was most excited about. And both of them turned out lovely. So I was very stoked. Yeah, sometimes what a concept, you just need to like take your time and do things, and it'll be delicious. The one I'm least excited about is the one I'm making almost next for Singapore. It's called Hainanese chicken. Okay. It is a whole chicken. You boil it, Okay, you boil it, and then you put it in cold water so it stops cooking.
Okay, yeah.
And then it like gets a little gelatinous.
Yes.
And you eat it cold, and I just don't know how that texture is going to work with me.
Huh.
So I think my biggest concern is like how I'm going to handle that. The great news is that you serve it with 3 different sauces. So even if there's shambles, I have chicken nuggets in the fridge.
There we go.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
That sounds great.
I feel like you found a great sort of cross-pollination of like people who watch like ASMR like food videos, but then also motorsport. That's like, you know, I've had like, I think we've all had that moment where we fall down a YouTube channel where we're just like watching somebody cooking things.
Oh, absolutely.
For me, there was a guy, he was a expert Chinese chef, and he had like this giant wok, and there's just this big old barrel of like just like oil, and he would just like mix it up, and he would do all these slow-mo shots, and like watching him slice the like pork belly. It's just, oh god, it was just like, this is I want to have
satisfying.
You know what the funny thing is about all these too? Like you watch, you're like, I could do that. Right? And then you and then you go out and buy the ingredients at the store, and then you come home and you're like, oh no.
Yeah,
oh, no.
you know, I was the one that got me that I was not expecting to get me. Monaco is like a little like pastry, like it's just folded over, and I was like, are you telling me my hands can't do this motion? Like I physically cannot put a little bit of stuff in here and fold over the edge. Couldn't do it. Every single one of them was a mess. Every single one looked different. I was like,
well, I mean, who knew? They tasted good at least, though, right? Like it's fine.
They did. They tasted great. Everything was fine. Every disaster I've had happen has been salvageable, so that's fine. It's just like the confidence you go into it with, where I'm like, I can do like the crimping of the edges of this little. No.
The biggest problem I always have with cooking is multitasking, because I will sit there and I'm thinking like I'm gonna focus all of my effort on making the meat and the sauce, and I'm like, oh, I forgot to put the pasta on, or like something will be going and I'm thinking it's gonna burn, so I'm trying to do this, and like I can't. That's the problem I have, is I cannot like multi, because I'm thinking, okay, where was this? Like I have to be better about like putting everything together and just having it all, you know, lined up.
That was the big thing that I think I learned most through this, is that I prep everything before I start cooking. And that has saved my life on so many occasions where I'm like, oh, I totally forgot that I needed to like be cooking a whole side dish right now. But the great news is that I've already prepped all of the vegetables, so I can just throw it in and it's fine.
You don't want to have a Ferrari pit strategy approach to cooking, like where you're
we
just
are
not
checking?
prepared.
No.
We are not prepared with the tires. No. It's just like, you didn't have the
my onion. Wait.
We will talk about it after the race.
We need to throw. We are checking question. Oh man, God,
that's Ferrari. The meme that keeps giving, you know.
The meme that keeps getting.
So with that, Elizabeth, you know, want to let you plug your socials. Give a shout out to where we can find you.
How can the folks reach you?
I am at Eliz_Blackstock on the website that was formerly doing business as Twitter. And I am at Eliz A Blackstock, all one word, on everything else. That's Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. Insert things here. You can go to my website, elizabeth-blackstock.com, and that's got all the other nonsense that goes on in my life. You can find me on LinkedIn if you really want to find me on LinkedIn. I don't do anything, but I have
it's just
it
there.
So it's there. I like to like see who I pay for, like the LinkedIn journalism things.
Okay.
I can see who sees me, because I'm like a little weirdo like that, but I don't ever actually like do anything with it.
Right. Yeah. It's just like paying for the premium version of a dating app. It's just like, who liked me? Oh, it's like, why women?
I want to know.
Miles away. Why are they liking me? That's perfect.
Excellent.
Yes. Idris, you want to do a little outro, or what do you want to say? Yeah.
I mean, I just have to say thank you so much for coming on. This has just been so informative and insightful for us that, you know, like before we started recording this, Gabe and I were talking, like just with all the research we've done over the last couple of weeks, of just like, yo, we messing up. We need to watch way more IndyCar, because this is where it's at, bro. Like there's
now
so much
going on.
You've
been enlightened.
Yes. Oh my,
yes.
I feel, I feel like intense FOMO of like I've missed out on so much so far, and like I need to get in now. You know, like the stock is still hot. Get in. You know, let's try to get some dividends stacked on this.
Yes.
You know, but yeah, just thank you so much for like the insight that you've given us here, and like to our listeners, like please check out all the articles and media that Elizabeth has generated about. First off, all the stuff she's written about motorsports, but like the IndyCar stuff is really, really helpful as far as getting your level of understanding up to a point where you're like, okay, I can do it, you know?
Yeah. At that point, it's just ready, like, what driver do I want to support?
Yeah, exactly.
At that point, it's just
But
like,
make
it's
sure
like
you know which livery
primary.
they're using, right? Like that's the only thing, right?
Exactly.
I love all the pink.
Exactly.
I love all the pink cars, I must say. But then I
Yeah.
think that means that Hulkenberg will never race for that organization ever.
Good.
Even though like he's like dressed himself as a Ken doll. I'm like, dude, you don't like pink. What are you doing? Like, and somebody pointed
His
out that
vibes are all off.
I think what didn't Crofty say that he reminded him more of Billy Idol than he did of a Ken doll? And I'm like, that's actually kind of accurate, honestly. I'm
Destroyed.
Yeah.
That is right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to F1 or F Off. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to hit us up, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the website formerly known as Twitter, at F1 or F Off. You can email us at F1 or F Off podcast at gmail.com. Give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast, and be sure to share with family and friends. Also, I wanted to say, Blue Sky totally sounds like a government front. There's no way that's real.
Yeah, it
there's
does.
there's no way that you're submitting data to that site and you're not being put on like an NSA watch list or something. That's crazy. Like
I think I've opened it like twice, and I just don't like. I look at the app itself is like too formal. Like the
nah.
app photo is like clouds, and I'm like, I just don't.
Nope.
Blue Sky.
I've seen
Blue
this
Sky,
before.
Blue Sky sounds like this an investment firm sponsorship that would be for like a car that's like nobody knows what they actually do because they're very vague about it.
Yeah.
It's like
Synergy.
we'd like to thank Blue Sky, our sponsor. It's like, are they a tobacco company? Are they an investment firm?
Yeah.
Do they sell
Crypto
fancy
bro?
shoes? Like,
Have you heard all of like the stories about Rocket that was sponsoring
yes,
like
you were telling me, yeah.
Just
what the freaking a cell phone company that also has funeral services?
doesn't make sense.
What?
Doesn't make sense.
What?
I mean, talk about diversifying your market.
Yeah, it's like
They were in every marketplace. The living and the dead.
it's like a I think you should leave sketch as a company all of a sudden.
Honestly.
I love it. It's so wonderful.